at Radio Free America, and this is Uncle Sam with music and the truth until dawn. Right now, I got a few words for some of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the wall. The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines, this is your song.
And welcome everybody to another special edition, I guess, of the Minuteman University Project. And we were hanging out over on gunchannels.com having a conversation in Gary's chat this morning. And as it was wrapping up, we were, everybody was just kind of hanging out. And I asked them if they'd be interested in kind of starting a conversation over here. And that's what we're doing. So this is, I guess, the beginnings of a project I've been thinking about for a while, and I'll try to explain it a little bit here, and then we've got people joining us from Gun Channels who are going to help thrash it out a little bit. So we've got Gary jumping in from Kansas. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for the invite.
We've got John Z jumping in from New York. Thanks for joining. And we got John jumping in from, where you at, John?
New Hampshire.
Right on. And then Rich.
Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, thanks for joining. And then Rich jumping in from Ohio?
West Virginia. You were close.
I was getting closer. So then for whatever reason, John Z is either not muting or unmuting or something, but he's in New York. So thanks guys for jumping in. And there's some links out there to others. If you want to jump in, feel free. And the idea here is, I've seen a couple of people attempt video, and then Patriot just jumped in from Michigan. Thanks for joining. We're just literally starting right now. So a project or something that I've seen people do over the years to just be funny or to kind of reflect on the community is to talk about types of gun owners. So you see this kind of guy at the range or something like that. And those are almost always like funny. I guess sometimes they might be informative for something, but for most of the time they're funny. So but you guys know what I'm talking about with that type of kind of not really a parody, I don't know what to call them, just kind of exaggeration comedy of whatever that's called, of gun owners or types of shooters maybe, or people at gun shops. I think I've seen stuff about like, this type of person at the gun shop. Well,
yeah.
So with that in mind, I've thought about doing something similar, but not at all to be humorous or funny, but instead to be useful and potentially like a training aid or some sort of visual aid, I guess a better word. Sorry to be be so callous to the non. But
no worries.
As an aid in communication to kind of structure conversations, I guess. So anyway, to talk about the life cycle of a shooter. So I don't even know anymore. I've met so many people that are into firearms. I'm almost 100% interested in guns. As a area of interest, as a political thing, as a hobby. A lot of my stuff, my whole life has revolved around them in some way or another. At least they've been around. So, and the things that I've been interested in that aren't guns lend themselves to guns. So very, very rarely am I around people that aren't in some way or another familiar with or involved in heavily firearms or some aspect of our community, our industry. So with that, I'm definitely interested in other people's insight that have different experience out there. But, we all come at this particular either hobby, interest, whatever we want to call the tools, the machines, the whatever, the stuff that we want to consider firearms, but we all come into it at different times in our lives and then for different reasons. And then we all, I don't know what to call it, like experience guns or deal with guns for some amount of time in our lives. And then some people get sick of them and quit dealing with guns or have to quit dealing with guns or just lose interest in them or whatever. So there's these flows or patterns, I suspect, that we could chart. So, if you look at somebody who's interested in driving, for example, at some point you could care less because you're a little kid, and then you learn about them in TV and movies, and you probably are interested in things like the Batmobile. And then you get more interested in like maybe Trans Ams or something, or El Caminos, and then you actually get a vehicle, and then you've got resources that allow you to buy certain things, even though you might like other things. And then maybe by the time you can afford something else, life decisions and things, you can only do this, or maybe you can afford to do anything. And so there's different ways that people are going to experience automobiles. And I don't know if anyone ever charged that or anything, or if there's been any effort in that, but just using that as an example, then maybe if we were to look at the ways that people become gun owners and kind of evolve as gun owners, then we can maybe see where we all each are in that spectrum or in that cycle, and maybe understand maybe better from what other perspectives people might be coming from and where they're going, so that we're not, if we're told we're in an echo chamber, at least we're efforting to get, to establish some harmony and some coordination in the echo chamber. We're not just all yelling and screaming like a bunch of monkeys, so that it's just chaotic. So maybe there's no point at all, and maybe it's a flop. But thanks for the people from Gun Channels here that decided to jump in and have this conversation. So where do we even start? I don't know. I mean, like I said, this isn't something that I've put too much effort or thought into, but I figured since we all were kind of chatting anyway, instead of just having a general conversation, kind of throw it a little bit more structured and throw this all at you. So where to start?
If we kind of talk about how we went through, our progression, I mean, maybe we can kind of get a consensus as far as, different things. When you first start, it might just be that you're excited about it and you don't know much about it. And then as you go on, you learn more about the Second Amendment. And, like my transformation, I'm into more of the Second Amendment now than I ever was as a young guy. I mean, guns were there. I used them and enjoyed them, but it was, I don't know, it was kind of like superficial almost, until you actually get in and then you see, the backside of everything. I don't know if discussing how, each of our progressions and see if there's a kind of a consensus maybe.
That's a good way to start, I guess. I guess my concern would be if we're only going to do a half an hour, we started telling stories, which is, we've all done before. Then it turns into just a chat, but that's a good way to get started. So maybe hitting some data points. So I'm going to go left to right a few times, and feel free if you want to extrapolate on something, but with the idea that we're going to try to, I don't know what we're trying to do, but anyway, so so that we just don't eat up the whole hour with 2 or 3 stories or something. Gary, at what age did you think you first got interested in guns? Not even had the opportunity or the ability to shoot them, but just were interested in guns. Have you ever thought about that?
Well, Dad always had guns. Dad hunted when I was a little kid, so we always had guns around the house. And as soon as I got big enough to shoot my own, or get one of my own, I always had the BB guns and stuff like kids do growing up. And as I got a little older, Dad let me shoot his 22, and then he let me shoot his 12 gauge. And then before you know it, I had my own. And that's the way I got started.
But what age do you think you started, or was there an age? Can you remember an age? Because now, as soon as I'm asking this, I don't think I can even answer. But is there an age when you were like, oh, I saw a Long Ranger or something, and that's when I decided I want to have a gun?
Not really. I mean, you grew up with a lot of Westerns and stuff on the TV back in those days. So we always thought it was cool, cowboys and Indians type stuff. So we always had the toy guns and stuff. So yeah, I wanted my own gun so I could go hunting with Dad. So yeah, probably about 10, 11, 12 years old.
So I don't know what age it was either, but I think it was more of like standing around watching them get ready and go hunting, and then sit around not being hunting when everybody else was, that I was like, well, I want to go hunting. And then, as part of going hunting, you got to have a gun and know what the gun's all about. But same way you had to know what boots are, so at some point, I'm sure you're a little kid going, man, I wish it would rain so I could wear my boots now that I know what boots are. So I don't know if I cared about guns before. I cared about just going out and doing stuff that required guns. And then at some point you figure out, oh, okay, there's guns, and that's a part of this. And then I guess I should have my own, right? Because I'm sick of using somebody else's or my brother's or something. But so, John, do you have can you recollect the time that you first got interested in the concept of guns? John, not John Z, because you're
Oh,
going
the
to
other
be
John.
on
Okay.
John Z.
Not really. I don't think I ever made a conscious decision. I mean, my father was in the military. He actually joined the Army the year I was born, and he spent almost 22 years. And he loved war movies, and I was always watching the war movies, and I always wanted the guns they were using.
That's
So I don't think it was a conscious decision. I just think I grew into it.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of saying it too, because just as you're saying that, Brian or Woods was typing that in the YouTube side for whatever reason. It's not a gunshot side. I think because his work computers can't get to the gun part of gun channels because of the URL. But he's saying they played Army every day for years with wooden guns, aka curved sticks. And yeah, whenever there was at least 3 of us around, even if we didn't have our stuff, we would find things that would emulate the gun, and then we'd run around having gunfights. And I never thought about that, but that has to be every kid, right? As soon as you start figuring out what movies are, you figure out, okay, that movie's boring, and that movie's awesome and fun, and that movie that was awesome and fun was probably some kind of gunfight movie.
Yeah, we used to do the same thing. You know, we went out and played war and cowboys and Indians and all that kind of stuff. But today, people would throw a fit if you did that.
And I figure that's one of the reasons I asked this, because some of us, we all have different lives or whatever. So some of us where it's like, oh, I just grew up doing that. I know I've talked to people who are like, oh, I never thought about guns until I was 27, and that's when I, XYZ. So Ghost just jumped in. I don't know what your deal is. I just figured I'd send you guys so you didn't feel excluded as well. We're just chatting about the life cycle of a gun owner and just kind of starting a conversation. But you're in Indiana. What's happening?
I just got in the car heading home. So
You're done already?
Yeah, I've got a 9-hour drive, so I've got to get home.
Oh, okay. So on the other end, you got to schedule the other side. I need to be at work at this time. I need to sleep for this time. So that means I got to leave at this time.
Pretty much, yeah.
Well, you're loud and clear. You got road in front of you to chat with us for a bit?
Yeah, that's why I jumped in. This was actually, I like the topic, but yeah, it's going to be great for me to chat driving down the highway.
All right. So like I say, we're just kind of thrashing out an idea I've had for a while. Just to recap for anybody that jumped in after the alerts went out or whatever. You've seen videos where they talk about this type of person at the gun shop or this kind of shooter at the range, and they're almost always like funny or humorous looks at like the different types of personalities, I guess would be the word, of people in the community or whatever. So that concept, but less, no humor. I'm not worried about making a joke about anybody or anything, but instead just thinking about the life cycle of a shooter, or the people that get involved in the shooting sports or in the guns as investments or hobbies, or the machines or the industry in whatever facet, support or whatever of firearms. Just maybe taking a look at some of the elements of the stages of development, I guess, so that as a group we can talk to each other and maybe just have that in mind, so that, okay, this person has probably just not gotten to, I find myself having this a lot of, I'll say like, what the hell's wrong with this guy? Oh, he probably just never has done this and that and the other thing before, so he's never had a taste of this or that or the other thing, so why wouldn't he think that? So if we all are aware of the levels and stuff, and I don't know, listening to some of the people on the NRA thing yesterday, I guess, who probably would consider themselves wise and probably have good intentions, but are seen to be just quoting the status quo or whatever it's called, or pulling the company line. Try to put each other in each other's shoes, I guess, is part of the effort. And at some point, I know that I don't want to call it evolved, but I certainly moved past ever giving a shit about doodads and whistles and stuff. And I don't know if that's because I've been around for so long or whatever, but I'm wondering if we can't establish something, because I'm guessing once you get to a certain age, you just don't care anymore about a better way to do things. If I've owned something for 20 years and it's reliable and dependable and I can still get parts for it, I just have no interest in replacing that thing. And I don't know, I just think maybe we can figure out places where we can fit advocacy into here and figure out, maybe ways to approach interest in our protecting our rights into people who haven't gotten to that level yet. Maybe get them there faster, or make them aware that you're about to enter a system. I'm trying to say like a cycle. You're entering in at this point. More than likely, you're going to experience this and this and this, and you're going to find out that this is important. I don't know, or that's sort of like overall goal. So I've explained it enough. John, what age did you get interested in guns for the first time?
I did not get
John Z.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you say the name. Sorry about that.
Did you call Ghost?
I'm gonna boot both of you.
Anyway, yeah. So when I was 10 or 11, probably, I had a friend, and he lived on one side of the border in Long Island, and I was in New York City. And I would go to his house, and he had swords and BB guns and pellet guns and all that sort of stuff. And being a 10, 11-year-old, I don't watch the news, so I'm indifferent to the stuff. So we go out, play with it. It's fun. I enjoy it. I don't have anything negative to say about it. It's a tool, or in our case, being 10, 11 years old, it's a toy. We're having fun. No one gets hurt. Yada, yada, yada. Years go by. Get a little older, you start watching the news. And I guess my head keeps going back to that time where I didn't need to think about whether it was good or bad, because it was just a thing, right? It was just a tool. Like we have our phone is a tool, or our stapler is a tool. It doesn't do anything without us making it do something. So I really had it. It was really no good or bad thoughts about it. It was just something there. And being in New York, and especially New York City, where everything was limited back then, I really couldn't experience it for myself. And if not for this friend that I had, I probably would have never experienced it at all. Moving forward, years down, I applied for jobs like state corrections, state parks, and it was all security jobs. So you're either armed or you're not working. I worked for the district attorney's office and a whole bunch of jobs. And I never questioned anybody around me that had a gun, because I know I felt more safer with them around. Because no matter where we are or what jobs you do, or civilian or military or whatever, if you're around good people, and you really are safer there than anywhere else. And I've come to the point of the realization that it's something I want to try and help protect, especially with the Second Amendment and those trying to really destroy it. I just try to maybe help some people understand that, as cliche as it sounds, it's when the bad things happen, it's not the gun, it's the person using the tool.
Well, that'll be my next thing, so everybody can start getting ready. So again, so that we don't turn it into, because it's tough. I'm trying not to leave open-ended questions, so that there's, you guys are on the spot to fill open-ended questions. So I'm going to throw this question going around: is when you first got interested in firearms, at what age you first got interested in firearms. My next question is going to be, at what time in your gun owning lifespan? So if you're were interested in guns your whole life, then what time, in your whole life did you get interested in Second Amendment? Or if you've been interested in guns for the last 10 years, at what point did you get interested in Second Amendment? I'm only assuming everybody's interested in Second Amendment because you're in this chat. I doubt anybody is in here that could care less. So I know that. So so the next question is going to be, at what time, at what age, or what, it doesn't necessarily have to be an age, because I doubt it matters if you're 27 or if you're 35. What matters is at what point in your progression of being a gun owner that it clicked that Second Amendment is important. So first, we're going back to that first one. I just want to give you guys a heads up, and the people that are listening to this, everything I do online is an effort in new media. There's a chat out there. I would be doing it on a different platform if I wasn't interested in the comments that are coming in. The panel joins this chat, or my chats, because they understand that we're going to be having a conversation with the people that are watching this thing live. So you're not just chatting to me, you're chatting to the other 6 people in here. And and the people that are watching this in the future. So everything you're putting in there, it's building the internet for the future. So if sometime we say something awesome in here, or something so crazy that it gets referenced in the future, your chat over there is going along with it. So value that or don't, but we value it. I value it. So if you're participating or if you're listening to this chat, you're in this conversation. So feel free to put in there the age that you became interested in firearms. But Patriot, you're up next. What age did you become interested in firearms for the first time?
I've always been, because it's kind of a family thing as far as hunting and that kind of thing. I did the more military movies instead of cowboys. I wasn't really, I mean, I watched them, but it was probably, I get the BB gun at 4, so or not 4, but I guess it might have been 4 or 5. I mean, it was pre-kindergarten, and so they'd always been around. Everybody hunted and going to the range. My actual local range is one of the ones I started off trying to look over the counter where you're way too short, but so that's basically it. I mean, it was preteen, as far as firearms, but.
And it sounds like I could have also been asking, is this like something that you intentionally had to pursue, or was it something that was just like eating Thanksgiving dinner? It was just there and part of your growing up.
My mom is oldest is 17, and so they were all hunters.
There must have been a problem with the speaker. Did you say your mom was the youngest of 17 siblings?
Yes, oldest of 17. Yeah.
Moly.
So I've got an uncle that's 2 years older than me. But yeah, so everyone hunted, and so when you were up there, I mean, my family hunted, so it was always around. I to this day I wish I had my grandfather's shotgun and that kind of thing. So I can still picture all pretty much everything that was up there, and so that it was kind of bred into me, I guess. But it wasn't that often, because I growing up I lived in the city, and so it wasn't the BB gun was the most I could have doing anything around my house. So it was always the trip to grandma's and everything that went along with it. But it was from very young, 4 or 5. But the Second Amendment part of it didn't start until maybe 3 years ago.
All right, now you're jumping the gun. So
Yes.
Then Rich, if you can remember, if there was a time, or if there's a specific time what age when you got interested in firearms?
My earliest memories are my grandfather sitting when I would go visit him, and we would sit and be watching a movie, and he would tell me what gun this was, what gun that was. So, as far back as I can remember. So when did we start forming memories? 3, 4 years old? It goes back a long way.
Yeah, right on. I never even thought about that too, but yeah, exactly. And you'd be sitting there watching because back in the day, you got to remember too, we didn't have as many movies, and you didn't get to pick the movie. It was whenever it was on TV. So Saturday or Sunday afternoon, more often than not, it was like a World War II movie, maybe a Korean movie. So yeah, you'd be watching it with your grandpa. Be like, what's that? You'd be like a Garand or whatever, or Garand. He'd be like, that's a Tommy gun. And that's how you figured out, what your grandpa was doing. And yeah, I never thought about that. That's very cool. So, and that's also way before you actually get guns. So yeah, I don't know what to call that. I guess just like, part of the family, like introduced with same thing as coffee and eating breakfast and, what are stairs? Like just guns are there.
Yeah.
So Ghost, you're last in, but you'll be first up on the next one. So you can do both in a row. So first off, if you can remember, what age did you first get interested in guns?
I was 19. I just turned 19. I was in boot camp, and I had shot, growing up in Dallas, I shot some 22 rifles here and there with my buddies at his ranch growing up, but that was just kind of what we did, shooting cans or whatever. I was like, that's what we do. But I was in boot camp, and second phase of boot camp, you get to go up to range and, do the rifle qual and grass week and all that, and pull that trigger, and you just had that aha, like this is awesome. And so I was 19. I was not a gun person at all until 19 years old, and I just kind of had that aha moment, you know. So,
All right. So then left you
I
hanging
didn't know
there.
if I was in
Then-
cell hell. I'm sorry.
no, I just trying to type and I was muted. So you're saying that as a kid, even going shooting with your friends or whatever, it was just like or are you saying it was like having like a swimming hole or like a, I don't know, like a go-kart? Like, yeah, it
Yeah.
was a thing to do. It was a recreational activity, but it wasn't like a driving motivational reason why you went and hung out with that kid, or like something you look forward to all year, other than like, okay, yeah, I like the lake because I can go fishing, but it's not
Right.
like you all into lakes or anything.
Yeah, his family had a huge. I mean, they had a huge cattle ranch and all that, you know. And so we go over there during the summertime. I'd spend most days over there because he had 3-wheelers, and that's before 4-wheelers. He had 3-wheelers and ponds we'd fish at for hours and hours and do whatever. And then, hey, let's go shoot some cans. And we would go get one of his little 22 rifles and we'd shoot Coke cans and stuff. So it was just one of those things that it was about 10 of us that hung out over there all the time because it was a cool place to be. You could be outdoors and doing stuff. And, we didn't play video games growing up, so we were always outdoors doing something. And that was just one of the things that we did,
All right, so now at what age, or like I say, it really doesn't matter what age because we're all different ages and it depends on where people start. So at what point in your gun ownerness or being a gun guy or whatever the hell we're calling being a gun owner, at what point did 2A become a thing slash, not, I don't want to necessarily shove as a priority on people, but like, an awareness that was a necessary awareness. Is that a good way of saying it?
Yeah, that's kind of interesting because when I got out of the Marine Corps, I started doing a lot of training just because I enjoyed that thing. So I went and got several different guns and ARs and different things. I started doing the training thing, but at that point, it still wasn't Second Amendment. It was just I enjoyed the training side, the tactical, and the strategy of all of that stuff. And then Sandy Hook happened. And I think, that's probably for a lot of people. I remember just the fact that the opportunity for them to take away our ARs was like weird to me. I was like, how is that possible? I didn't understand the politics of the gun community and all that. I was just a guy that liked to shoot and train. And so after that, I started kind of researching of like, can they really do this? And how are we letting them do this stuff and all that? And probably when I started really about 3 years ago is when I kind of started diving into the political side of the Second Amendment and understanding what our rights are and how to keep those rights and understand honestly what the threats are. It's one thing to understand what your rights are, but it's also something to understand what the threats to your rights are. And it's probably about 3 years ago that I started doing that, and that's about about 3 years ago.
Right on. So, yeah, that's interesting. So I don't know if I did my piece before. So I think like a lot of the guys who've been having guns around their whole lives, I just don't know what it's like to not have guns around. I had toys that were guns. So if it was raining or it was at night or I was supposed to be like quiet, I'd go in the basement and shoot. Like I had this thing that had like a flashlight on it, kind of looked like a Surefire light underneath this like BB gun looking thing, and it would shoot it at this like thing that would knock cans off. It was pretty neat. So I could shoot that thing. I would have those I had everything. I had the little rubber BB things, where those little disc guns were. I had that kind of stuff. So if it was like, at night and everybody was mad at me if I was or too loud to shoot BB guns, I'd shoot that. If it was during the day and I could be as noisy as I wanted, I'd had inside, I had traps and stuff for shooting inside. And then outside, I constantly had guns around. But like you guys said, they were just always around. They were just always just like having a car or, eating breakfast. And then awareness, I think, just like Ghost said, it was national issue. And for me, I think I can I can remember being pissed when 86 happened, because I can remember, I was just becoming an old enough kid to understand that, like, you can't have a machine gun tomorrow, and then that happened. And not that we had a bunch of machine guns laying around, but I didn't like the concept that I couldn't, right? That just, I mean, I'm regular, so it bothers me that you can't. And I can remember that happening. And I wasn't old enough to do anything about it, and I wasn't motivated. Nobody motivated me to do anything about it. Then I can remember 94, and that's where I became hardened. I was like, screw this. This cannot be. So since then, I've been aware. And I think I've probably been ashamed until about 2010, when I first visited the Gun Rights Policy Conference, because as much as awareness as I had, and as much resilience as I had, I wasn't enabled. I didn't know anything to do other than to join organizations, and then there was no effort to be part of, right? I didn't know anything that I was missing. So I think for a while there, I felt like I was probably doing something by being a member of the NRA, right? And then being a member of a second organization. Well, I'm even doing more, and then I'd be a member of a third organization. Well, I'm just 3 times more activist than anybody else. But I didn't realize there was other stuff I could have been doing. In 10, I started to realize what all could be done. And since then, I've been efforting harder. But yeah, that's interesting. If you're not paying attention to what's going on, even stuff that could be headline news and cause big issues, you could just not be, I don't want to say concerned, but just not as concerned about it, I guess would be the word. Anyway, so Tony, we're starting off with ours, and Tony's joining us from Chattanooga. What age did you start getting interested in firearms?
Well, is my microphone working?
Yeah, you're loud and clear.
Okay, thanks. I'm trying a new mic here.
Your Condor 5x5.
Oh, cool. I grew up, in the Appalachian Mountains, so it was kind of part of the culture. And this is not a sob story, but I really didn't know my father. So my brother and sister and I spent a lot of time at my grandfather's house, because my mother, she worked two jobs she was a nurse to support us. But so we spent a lot of time, at my grandfather's house. And my grandfather had all these, cool, they were cool to us. I'm sure they weren't cool to everybody else, but he even had this goose gun, and it was kind of funny watching, growing up, seeing those guns. And we would play and shoot. They lived in an old tin shack, old shack with a tin roof. And we would sit out on the back porch where we took a bath in a metal tub, and the mice would poke their heads out, and we'd learn to shoot them with our BB guns, And so, we just kind of grew up around it. It was, my grandfather was still of the generation that had to basically hunt. I don't know if you're familiar with the Sevierville, the Smokies up there. They literally, he was still hunting for food when he was a kid, So you had to have a gun. You had to have guns in the house. They were basically tools of the culture. And I grew up around that. So when I was a teenager, my brother and I used to challenge each other, dare each other to shoot that old 16, I think it was a 16 gauge or a 20 gauge goose gun. It must have had like a 3-foot barrel on it or something. It was the longest barrel I've ever seen. But anyway.
So when it's something that people are like, how do you get that across that, like, they're part of the, I don't know, whatever, your lifestyle, maybe that's the way to say it. Like, they're just, like you say, like, they're in use, so they're there, just like your shovels are and your wheelbarrow or something. Like, they're there. Nobody, you spend maybe a minute, like, hey, this is dangerous, and if you point it at somebody, you want to be careful, blah, 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 because just like you would with like anything that's hot or sharp, right? Like, there's certain things that you give a little bit more priority to as far as safety, but otherwise, they're just there. So it's not like, how do you explain to somebody who's not been around firearms? It's not like our parents sat down one day and said, okay, here's a thing called firearms, and now we're going to talk about them, and here's why they're so special. We'd be like if your parents sat down and said, okay, there's this thing called wallpaper, and if you were to plaster yourself behind it, you could die. So let's be really careful about wallpaper. Like, it wasn't a thing. And I think nowadays kids, I don't know, kids, anybody who's in a family or lifestyle that like don't have guns in it. I mean, how do they, you know what I mean? Like I just don't have that ability to understand what it's like to make a decision, because now you have to make a decision, right? You have to decide, you know, we don't even have guns. We don't talk about them, I guess. Like guns are separate things. And now you have one gun and then you get two guns, I guess. And then I don't know, I guess hopefully some people go buy like 12 at a time. Like I want to get into guns, so I'm going to go buy 12 and get started right. But it seems like a lot of people buy a gun and stuff. So like I don't know what it's like to live with a gun. I don't even have an idea what it's like to live with one gun. Like that doesn't make, I can't even imagine. So, you know
I
what I
mean,
mean?
we had when my grandfather died, which was a pretty early age, I was pretty young, I guess 7 or 8 years old. My mother, you know, sought out to find someone to help me and my brother, you know, become men or whatever, you know how that works. Where she found a family friend, he was a U.S. deputy marshal, just coincidentally, right? So we always had good influences around us, you know. I mean, this guy was hardcore. Of course, you know, he was obviously into revolvers back then, and that's how I became deaf, basically in my left ear. I learned a hard lesson early in life. I walked up on him when he was shooting his 357 Magnum, and I didn't have hearing protection. I always think that's where it is. It might just be something, you know what I mean? But anyway, that was an experience I remember as a kid. But and I remember him teaching us about safety, you know, and he was good at, you know, I think what I'm trying to say is that I grew up around, you know, I had good influences. It was I guess they were good examples of how to handle firearms. Does that make sense? So,
Okay, and then second part of the question, or the second question, and then we go on to the third question, I guess, would be at what point, again, you're doing it your whole life, so at what point did 2A become like aware / in issue / priority or whatever the concern?
I remember, you see, that's funny because, you know, you do grow up around it and you have to go back and think, when was that point when I started thinking more about those types of issues versus just hunting and fish, you know, the sport part of it. I think it was around the time of the Brady Bill. I do remember that being a kind of a big issue. And you know what I mean? I kind of was really trying to think back. And I think that's during that time, I remember there was a lot of press, you know, a lot of news and a lot of press about that. And that's why I think I started thinking more about the Second Amendment issues during that time. And of course, you know, coming forward from there. And then, of course, you know, when I got involved with YouTube 2006, and I met you guys, I started really becoming that became more of a focus than the sporting side of it.
So maybe that's the next question. And let me see what's going on the outside there, since we asked for questions earlier, or asked for people to participate. The next question, unless you guys have one that you want to throw at us or to the panel, and I don't know how to explain this one either, because I never lived this life. But again, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of somebody who's like, I'm going to get into guns, and then they go buy a gun, right? So you buy a gun, and then at some point you're like, oh, I'm digging this, I'm buying another gun. So I don't know if this will apply to everybody, and for the rest of you, maybe this will go. Maybe we don't have to ask everybody, but for those of you that this applies to, chime in with at what, again, not an age, because it's going to depend on, you know, whatever, but at what instigates you as a, let's call it, initial gun owner is the next stage of gun owning multiple guns? I guess maybe that's the question. If it sounds like we're either born into guns, or you made a conscious decision to buy guns. Okay, if that's the two types of people that we can either be, right? I guess there's probably something else we're not knowing, because we're not, you know, there's a lot of people out there. But if we drop it into, you either were born with guns and your family had them, or you decided to buy a gun, so now you're a gun owner. Is the next level of gun owner more guns, or is it? And then we know that a level of gun ownership is Second Amendment awareness. I mean, I'm not unrealistic. That's certainly not the second level of gun ownership. I mean, that's like way the hell down the list, right? But at some point in gun ownership, like you decide to buy a shotgun, right? At some gun ownership, you decide to buy a rifle at some point, like a bolt action, right? At some point, you decide to buy an AR. Would a good second level gun life cycle be second gun, or is there a better second level life cycle of a gun owner? I'm not going to go left, right, anybody.
Well, I think for me, my second level, because I was all shotguns for until I was in my mid 50s. So my second cycle was buying a handgun. I'd never owned a handgun before. So realizing I needed something for personal protection, I wanted to get into that, but that was totally separate from my bringing up. Dad never had handguns and stuff like that. So I was venturing out in new territory when I did that.
So maybe that's the second level. So instead of being just a second gun, because you could get into shotguns and own 1,200 shotguns and never become a collector because you just have them for sport, or the other way around. You could collect a whole bunch of stuff and never even shoot them. But maybe the next level of being a gun owner is evolving to a second interest in guns.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, is whatever your initial reasoning or interest in guns were. Yeah, that's what I would say is whether it's wanting to get revolvers or wanting to carry or whatever, but that second interest in guns, because that's probably going to push you to the next part, which is the second gun or the third gun or whatever. So I think you have to have that reason to go buy that second gun. So that's probably that next level for me.
Hey, G.
Yeah.
I think the next level for me, I've been shooting my father's guns, and it was just to go out and buy that first gun. And then from there, I knew I had to have another one.
That's good. Maybe that's how we as people that grew up into guns just had them in the family. That's probably our same thing as going out and buying our first gun. Like whenever we got our first gun, I mean, I didn't buy mine, I got mine, but same thing. Like now I'm not shooting my dad's or my grandpa's or somebody else's gun. Now I'm shooting my gun. Like that's the same or the equivalent of being an adult or whoever that says, I'm gonna go buy a gun. And then we're at that first level gun owner / participant in the community, whatever we're calling ourselves.
Yeah, I gotta agree with John on that because that's the way it was with me. My first two guns were both given to me. One was a single shot 410, and the second one was a Smith & Wesson Model 66 that my grandfather had bought me. As we go through this, if we start selling swords, you're going to see my grandfather was probably my primary influence on getting into firearms and the Second Amendment because when he taught us to shoot, he also was teaching us the Second Amendment at the same time. So that he was a big influence on me when it came to that. But yeah, my first gun that I actually bought myself would probably be that second tier as well.
Well, and unless anybody wants to throw in on that, keep cooking on what would be a good second level or second cycle. But I like where Rich was taking that. I'm going to go right to left since you just started it. Who was what do we call it? Like your inspiration, guru, role model, person that got you into it and was there for you. So Rich said it was your grandpa.
Mm-hmm.
Patriot. Dang, nobody? Feel sad for Patriot. We still live? I'm working?
Yeah.
Yeah. My inspiration was my father. 1969, he brought home with him from Vietnam a Remington Rand 1911A1, and he gave it to me. And
How old were you?
I was in 69, I would have been 17.
Oh, that's kind of old. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was, but he hunted when he was a kid, and when he joined the Army, his father, who was a alcoholic, sold all the guns that he had collected. He had about 6 of them. And
Oh,
the only thing,
his dad had sold your dad's guns while he was away.
right,
Oh.
right. And the only thing he had left was the 22 that his father had given him, which he gave to me as a kid, you know. But he was my mentor when it came to guns.
Patriot, you're up. See you on mute. Okay, so John Z, who's your role model? What's a better? Is there a better word for guru?
Chuck Norris, Texas Ranger.
In real life, though, like the human being, or if you didn't have one, but
in real life, him and actors like that, not actors, but the role that they were playing. Having grown up in a house with no firearms and in a city with that abhorred them like the plague, that's what I considered the gun lifestyle. And it because of those characters that people played, though, they usually always the good guy, always, quote unquote, trying to do the right thing, and that's, I guess, instilled a positive version of what the media tries to play out today. Because between 15 and 20, I didn't really watch the news, and then I started watching the news. You started watching the media, and I use the word news very loosely. And from what I knew growing up as a kid, it was always the good guys use these tools to save the day. And then you start watching the news, and again, I'm calling it news. You always started watching the media, and they always portray the tool as the evil thing rather than the evil person committing the evil acts. And I'm like, this doesn't balance out. It doesn't make sense. And that's really what ignited something in me that told me someone is vilifying these things for their own agenda. And that's awesome. That's when I said to myself, these are good things, good tools, good for people to have. And eventually later in my life, I said, I got to find a way to get out and get to those places, because not only do those places that allow freedom and allow you to use the tools made available to you, but they also run their states a lot better than the states that try to suppress what you are able to do and what you're able to say and all that stuff. So I guess in my early 20s is when I came to the realization that this is something in the future that I would like to be part of.
I just wanted to say thanks to Patriot for joining. He just let us know in the chat out there that he had to jump out. So, dude, I'm glad you joined, because that is awesome perspective. That's what I'm seeking. Is I can't even imagine that perspective. So, what it sounds like is I'm asking who is our role model, guru, mentor. Maybe that was where I was looking for. Mentor as a gun owner, like who helped us, to ask the silly questions to, or to, set us into directions and stuff. And as you described that, I thought, man, that's sad. That sucks that you didn't have anybody like that. But what are you going to do if you don't have anybody like that? You don't have anybody like that. But unlike what our perceptions might be, you're an individual with a free mind, and you're doing your thing, and you're interested. And then it sounds like just the way that they're doing their thing, as far as describing the news, made you skeptical. And again, instead of just dealing with that or living a life around that, you decided to dig in and scrutinize and question that and pursue it. And it sounds like you found other people beyond that. So that's freaking cool. And you're an indicator of how many millions of people in the area you live in, not just the city, but the area you live in, the region, right? Like imagine what it's like for people who are more than willing, but just not aware or able, or, have the wherewithal and the gumption that John's got to question and dig a little bit. But man, think of the potential we've got there. And if you're not a single issue voter and you're voting based on, I don't know, any of those other issues that are out there, and guns are not a single issue for you, and they're not, they're just one of the other pawns in the chess game. Imagine how different that might be if we were able to reach some of those people in John's type of situation.
And also not just me, but like other people, I've been fortunate enough to run into you guys, the gun channels crowd, the lifestyle, the sports, whatever, all of that put together to really learn more. And I really learned a lot from you guys. So that's just an added benefit.
Yeah, and I had no idea that was an aspect of it. So it's super neat. Let's see, with Patriot jumping out, I think I was going this way. John, did you answer your pop? Gizzard, did you go? You next?
Yeah, I haven't went yet.
Wait a minute, I was supposed to Gizzard you. I should go on to Ghost. All right, I guess you can go since you started.
Okay. Well, I can go quick. My dad was my first inspiration, of course, but I didn't get into handguns until just about 4 years ago, and my inspiration was my daughter, strangely enough. She wanted to get her own gun. I had to help her find one, so I had to learn about them, and as soon as I got into it, I realized I wanted one too. And that kind of got me going, and then as I got talking to my friends, they had this gun, so I wanted one, and it kind of grew from there. So it's varied for me.
Super cool. Ghost.
That's interesting. At first I didn't have one there for a while. In my time in the Marine Corps, I was
with your story, it's kind of an interesting one because you don't get your drill sergeant doesn't just hang out as like your
for
a long time. You're transitioning through all kinds of different instructors and guns, literally. So, okay, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, but it's true. Like especially for someone who came into the Marine Corps without basically any firearm experience, they taught me how to shoot, obviously how they wanted me to shoot, and I didn't really have to ask questions because they told me what they wanted me to do, and I just did it. And we got to use different shoot, but it was here's how. And so you just did it. Marine Corps.
Okay, you've been breaking up a little bit, but that last time it was a pause. So repeat that last part again, if you would.
Okay. Hear me now?
It starts out good. I think what it is when you're driving, get used to talk for a bit, but then create some pauses because the internet needs to catch up when you're whipping through all those cell towers. So just pause more, and I think it starts out fine always.
Okay, so you can hear me now, though, right?
Yeah.
Okay. We basically were just told how to shoot different platforms of guns, and we just did it. And so there was no reason to ask questions at that point. For me, it didn't start until after I got out of the Marine Corps, and I read a book from Asad Ayub, and I read a book from Clint Smith, or a video. I think it was a video of Clint Smith and a book from Asad Ayub that was given to me by someone. And that's kind of reason why those are two of my kind of heroes in the industry. Is that's kind of how I learned to do everything outside of an M16, So I would say those two just because I happened to find them, but I didn't have one until then.
Oh, what? No, first off, technically, I don't know if, but pausing like that, it was 100% clear all the way through that whole part. So I don't know if it was physically like you weren't driving
Okay.
underneath the bridge or something or
Yeah,
what.
I was trying to pause a little bit.
Yeah, that worked great. But yeah, and then what you were saying about like, in military basic instruction stuff, no matter the branch, you get a gun or whatever, but you get a gun for like the hours that you're on the range, and then probably a couple hours to clean it, and then maybe you have it for some obligation, but then you don't just like have off time to go shoot because oh, you're on a base that has a range and you have a gun and there's ammo. That doesn't matter. You have things to do, so it's not like you just go shoot whenever you feel like it. So even if you were super interested, you only get the thing in your hands occasionally, in the great scheme of things.
Exactly.
And when you do, you're doing some task. You don't just get to go play with it.
Yeah, that'd be nice if we could, but we had the option, we had the availability to go to a range on our off time, but I
Really?
mean, let's be honest, we could check out from our armory, not
Oh,
over the
yeah.
weekend or anything, but we could check it out. It had to return the same day. But if we wanted to go to the range, we could. The problem is you do so much stuff that the last place you want to be on your off time is on the base,
Yeah, especially even if you're super interested, because there's girls and you got money. So yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Tony.
We're talking about gurus or
Yeah, I mean, you
our
kind of
mentors.
before, but yeah, mentor. Guru.
Yeah, I probably jumped the gun a little bit, but he was a family friend, and like I said, he was a U.S. deputy marshal, so he had all the guns. And what was funny is he worked his way up through the ranks and became the head of the local security at our local nuclear plant. We have a nuclear plant 20 miles up the road, and it was more like a SWAT type team than, you know what I mean? The people who are head of this, or when you're in that type of security for a nuclear plant, it's more like, I don't know, it's more tactical. So he had all the garb, he had all the gear, and it was really a fun influence for me and my brother. But I just remember it was really fun growing up around that. And he actually would be the one that gave us our guns for Christmas, that kind of thing. I forgot whether it was a Winchester or a Stevens. My first cool gun he gave me was it was an over under. It had a 22 on top and a 410 on bottom. And that was awesome. And
like a skeletonized, the survival rifle one, or like a wood stock?
No, it was wood. Yeah, we didn't have anything kind of tactical. All of our stuff was wood stocks, when we were growing up. But it was, I forgot, I can't even think of it. But it wasn't funny. It was terrible. But I would let my brother basically have control over my guns because he was older. And I remember he got killed, and his so all my guns basically went to my nephews, and I didn't really ever say anything about it. So I found myself at one point without hardly any guns, and that's kind of when my YouTube career took off in 2006. I had a couple of guns, but I didn't have anything like I used to. So for about 5 or 6 years, I was gun poor, and then YouTube comes along and the whole gun community thing, and then I remember I had that gunning for 100. If you remember, I was looking for a carry pistol, and that's how I met 10 Outdoors 9. So he entered the contest and said, "Oh, you're gonna have a Glock 19," So that's how I met him. But anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to tell you the whole story. But
No, that's what it's all about. Well, I originally started this with the intention of going for about a half an hour. We've gone, I think, for about an hour. All right. So YouTube, how hard would it be for them to put a clock on here, like an elapsed time clock? So difficult. I can't tell if we've been going for 38 minutes or an hour. So it's up to y'all. You can keep going or not. But I think we've accomplished really because I didn't have a clear goal anyway, except to kind of start this conversation about this life cycle of a gun owner. And I think that we established that you can become a gun owner a couple of different ways, and then there's these stages. The first stage being, official gun owner, and then we're kind of focusing on a second stage being, expanding your interest and then purchasing different types of guns for different what are we going to call that? Like a different type of shooting. If we're going to keep going, my next question is going to be, is there a third evolution? We know that at some point you become a 2A interest, you know, you become interested in the rights to own. But that, I don't know if that's necessarily again, a third step or anything. I'm kind of guessing that's farther down, just based on my experience. But if we're going to keep going, first off, let me know if you want to keep going, you people on the panel and you people listening. And then if so, what would be a second evolution or a second level of a third cycle, I guess you should say, the next cycle of a gun owner, the next evolution?
I think for me, it was when I got my first subscription to Guns and Ammo in, I think it was 75. It may have been 74 or 75. And I started seeing articles in Guns and Ammo about the Second Amendment. And I think that's where I first got my introduction to the Second Amendment fight, and that we needed to protect it. And I think that was the next evolution for me.
Yeah, I think that if if you're involved in the Second Amendment side of things, that is the next evolution. But I think for the people, there's a vast majority of gun owners and firearm enthusiasts that are not Second Amendment aware. So maybe the next evolution is bringing someone else into the firearm community. That could be a natural evolution.
Yeah, it goes pretty much to say what I was going to say. Passing on what you know, 'cause like I was saying, my grandfather, when he first taught us, what I guess this would be my baseline where I started. When he first started teaching us, he also the shoot. He was teaching us about the Second Amendment then. So, I mean, if you want to look at it that way, my baseline was knowing the Second Amendment because that's what my grandfather wanted. He wanted us to understand why we were able to have these firearms and why we were supposed to have these firearms and why we had the Second Amendment and all that. The older we got, the more in depth he would go in it. So I would say the third would probably be passing on what you know to somebody else.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I felt this responsibility from growing up around guns when I started having kids. I felt a huge responsibility to take them out, you know, and do the same. And so I think that's it. It's mentorship. If you don't have kids, find some kids to help out, teach them. You know, I think that's kind of the natural progression of the life cycle of a gun lover, a freedom lover.
Not always just kids either, like other peers and friends and family, right?
Right.
Yeah, I was just assuming that would be a natural progression myself, because my brothers and I, our friends, we always talked about guns. We always talked about doing this stuff. And then we got old enough and we went into it.
Yeah, for me, it was cool. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was saying for me, it was my daughter. She's I'd say about 3 years ago, she started asking kind of go to the range with me and all of that. So we would go and shoot and all that. And then to see her get her concealed carry last year was, for me, you guys know that's a passion for me. But for her to ask for her birthday, I said, what do you want for your 21st birthday? She goes, I want to get my concealed carry permit. And for me, that was as good as it gets. So, I mean, that was awesome for me. I only have one kid, so that's all I could pass it on to. And my wife has no desire, and that's okay. I don't force her, but my daughter showed interest. And so that for me was all I could do was to bring her in. So maybe when she's got kids, she could at least get to tell her kids, about them. So that was kind of cool for me.
Yeah, in my case, it would have been asking my son what he wanted for his 18th birthday, right? And what's he tell me? He wants an SKS. So my wife and I went and found him an SKS. That's what he wanted.
Well, a lot of people like to say thank you for your service when they hear people are in the military or whatever. I'd like to say thank you for good parenting, because that's freaking brilliant parenting right there.
Me and the word brilliant do not often collide in the same sentence, but thank you.
So, couple of things you guys have touched on, and I don't know even if these are sequential, but I think they are levels, right? But when John first started talking about the subscription to a magazine, right, a periodical, I think, is it possible that a level of whatever cycle would be when you be showing interest in the history or the something, where you start to either get a magazine or buy some books, research lever action or a type of gun or a war guns of a certain era or something like that.
Yeah, I don't see why not. I mean, acquiring more knowledge is always a form of evolving, right?
Right, like a level of interest, like okay, I really like this kind of car, but like, oh, now I like this car so much that I bought a book or two and I know everything about every model of it or something, or I like playing guitar, but now I know everything about this Gibson blah 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 kind of guitar.
And don't forget also the gun magazines are also a form of news media where you would learn something there that you wouldn't necessarily learn in the mainstream.
Yeah, and I've started collecting old gunsmithing books that I think is pretty cool.
No, see, now we're adding more and more. So I think the next one that came up after the reading would have been, I don't know if anybody said this specifically or if I just gleaned this from everybody's comments that are coming in, but is another level or another evolution or something in the cycle when you decide that, and this takes, I think, this isn't for everybody. This is going to take being in the community and the awareness of everything through a couple of bad times, or whatever we want to call, like reactions and cycles to bad events. So whenever you start prepping, either guns or ammo, so again, from my experience, there's the person that's either had guns forever or owns their first gun, and then they either become a gun owner and leave, or they're satisfied with one gun, or something happens. Fill in the blank. Y2K, assault weapons ban, and just fill in the blank. There's too many to fill in. And then they decide it's time to acquire enough ammo to ride through bad times. Once you've lived through bad times, either well off or barely got by, you become a prepper, right? But no, maybe not everybody. And like I said, I don't know if it's necessarily sequential. I don't know if you have to go through the prepping stuff, but I think that is a phase.
I think for me, it was kind of a quick phase because I really wanted to try to get into it, but I don't know. I just never was really the type of person to be nervous about.
I don't necessarily mean like going all out into like having frozen foods and water and everything. I'm talking just like, oh, I like shooting, and it was tough to get 22 ammo. I think I'm going to keep a couple of thousand rounds of 22 ammo on the shelf all the time. And if I go shooting, I'm not going to shoot my last 100 rounds. I'm going to go back to the store and buy 500 rounds and shoot 100 out of that, put 400 on the shelf. That kind of mindset. Or like, these might not be around forever, so maybe my next decision will be an AR-15.
I just remember having an ammo can full of 22 when the whole prepping thing started becoming popular on the internet. Does that make sense? So it was kind of natural, and I'm not bragging or anything, but it was kind of natural just to have stuff around. And then I started seeing this prepping thing on the internet, and I was like, huh, that's funny. Now this is going to become a fad. I don't know how to describe it, but we just always had lots of ammo. I don't think there was never a point in time when I said, oh my God, I got to go out and buy ammo. You know what I mean?
Well, 22 ammo is weird because unless you just shoot revolvers and bolt actions, you're going to experience a situation where this gun likes this ammo and then, it doesn't like that ammo anymore. Or I'm buying this ammo because it's on sale, but my gun don't like it. And you're not going to throw it away, so you just have it. So you end up accumulating 22 long rifle ammo if you own any amount of 22s, because only this gun will eat it, or only that gun will eat it. And you just don't shoot that gun enough, so it starts to accumulate. Same thing can happen, I guess, with 1911s, and doesn't happen so much with 9s.
Yeah, I'm pretty much in the same boat Tony is. I've really never been into the prepping thing, and I didn't think of buying ammo as prepping, but I got a few ammo cans full of it.
So then the next one would be, and people can throw in whatever other ideas they might have for levels or cycles or whatever, but then they've been talking reloading. I'll acknowledge that one. Again, that's why I don't think these things are sequential, and they're certainly not all. It's not like you have to acquire each of these in order to get to the next level, but they're branches potentially or something like, they're just ways that you could get into it, or at different levels you can get into it. But I imagine some people just get into the reloading. I'm sure that happens. Just like whatever it is about the reloading aspect of it, and then they know there's somebody who's always going to shoot whatever it is they make.
Yeah, my father-in-law, he was really into reloading before he passed. He tried getting me to get into it. I mean, I tried it. I just wasn't my thing. I just couldn't get into it.
Is anybody still at NRA? Does anyone know if anyone is still at NRA?
Yeah, I know Clover and that guy's wife are going to be there till the end of it. When I left, Tardot and Gunpowder Beauty were still there. Clover and that guy's wife was there. I want to say Gun Snob was still there. I think most everybody was starting to leave. But I know Clover's going to be there the whole time today.
Well, I know Obnoxious One just went live a few minutes ago.
Did you all meet up with Tony Simon?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I spent some good time with Tony.
That's cool.
I tell you, one of the coolest things that happened for me when I was sitting there with Tony Simon. I was sitting having a conversation with Tony and Aaron Paulette. And I don't know, I'm sure you guys know who Erin is, but I'm going to say she. But Pink Pistol, she's an amazing person. It was incredible, the conversation that we had. We were just kind of sitting there in the meeting room with Tony and Aaron, and it was awesome. But yeah, Tony's a great guy.
So I just texted Clover the request to go by booth 2407 for Gary. So if he's still there and they still have him. Actually, the last couple of minutes of NRA is probably your best bet. How was it, taking a sidetrack here, for swag this year? Were they giving it out by the handfuls, or were they limiting it? Was it available, or was it scarce?
It depends. Most of it was left over from SHOT or Great Outdoors or IWA, whatever they had, bought a bulk of for the year, and they were just, whenever they had left and it was gone, it was gone. I really didn't go after swag a whole lot, but I know that there were people that were walking around with bags full of swag, so that was definitely there if you were looking. But for the most part, a lot of them were like, hey, sorry, I ran out of patches yesterday, or we just brought what we had left over at the end of the year. So it was kind of depending on the company.
Yeah. So reloading, and then I was going to get into CCW. Is CCW a level? Again, some people are going to come right in at that level. That's going to be their introduction, but not everybody for sure, right? And I know that it takes people a little customization to get their head around the idea of carrying if they're completely unfamiliar with it.
That's probably been, for me, that has been my biggest phase is when I kind of made that decision that I wanted to start carrying every day, is kind of, once again, we're talking 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And so it kind of was the same time as Sandy Hook and the AR scare and all of that. And then it was just, I want to make this more part of my life. I was becoming more educated on the Second Amendment. I was becoming more educated on different things. And for me, the concealed carry was that next step. But then that has turned in the last few years as a very much of a big passion of mine. So concealed carry is a really big, part of my evolution.
Now, for me, when I first started getting into handguns was just about the time that Kansas passed the constitutional carry, which was to take effect July the 1st. And so after I bought my gun, You know, at first I said, oh, I'm not going to carry it. I'm just going to take it to the range and stuff. Then the more and more I thought about it, it's like, you know what? Maybe I ought to think about it. And so I had a couple months to practice before it was legal for me to do it. So I'd wear it around the house and stuff like that. And then when July the 1st came around, it's like, okay, I'm going to be brave. I'm going to take it out and I'm going to do the Walmart walk like everybody does and stuff like that. And when I realized not everybody in the world was staring at me, it's like, okay, I can do this and I'm going to do this. And I have ever since.
Good here. So then the next one, I think Ghost brought it up, would be potentially joining a 2A organization of some sort, like, either the NRA. A lot of people probably introduced that way, or maybe Gun Owners Second Amendment Foundation, or the local, something they see at a gun show, like a booth for a state level organization or something. And I think that's another turning point potentially to decide it's worth being a member, being one of the member of one of the members of an organization.
Well, as soon as I bought my handgun back in 2015, wasn't long, about a month afterwards, I decided to join NRA because I thought that's just what you did, And it wasn't until I think it was about the time I started joining gun channels, they started talking about other organizations, which I wasn't even aware that they existed. Definitely after Vegas happened, that kind of brought everything to the head and stuff like that. And I really started opening up my eyes as to what else was out there.
Yeah, personally myself, I've been an NRA member off and on for as long as I can remember. It started when my grandfather bought me one of those youth memberships when they first started. At least I think it's when they first started issuing back in the '80s. When he got me that, and ever since, and except for a extended period in the '90s into the early 2000s when I just couldn't afford to do it, I've been a member, and I've been a life member now, like endowment level life member at that, for a few years now. So yeah, I've always, for the most part, been a member of the NRA, and I haven't gotten into GOA or anything yet because there's just issues with money and stuff sometimes. I just haven't gotten around to it. But yeah.
Yeah, for me, it was NRA, I think in 2015. I started joining the NRA then. And, I'd heard of GOA, I've heard of Second Amendment Foundation and other places, but not until I really kind of came around gun channels and started talking to G and a bunch of other people and kind of was enlightened to there are other options out there besides the NRA that, the Second Amendment Foundation was really appealing to me right away because it's more of the law and the court cases and really kind of taking some of these things to court and try to do it that way instead of howling at the moon at the political stages. So that was really appealing to me. But I mean, yeah, the NRA was a first for me. That's kind of everyone knows. But now it's GOA, FPC, and Second Amendment Foundation is, and I'll support whatever I can whatever I can afford to support.
I guess I've been a member of the NRA for, I don't know, 15 or, I wouldn't say 20 years, but at least 15 years. But again, we kind of grew up with, American Rifleman magazines, Field and Stream, Shooting Illustrated. That's when we thought of the NRA as the National Rifle Association. It was more of a sporting, hunting, hunter safety. I think my first hunter safety course was through the NRA, and that fella, our big brother guy, took us through that. It was really a lot of fun. But yeah, now I'm a member, life member, Second Amendment Foundation, Gun Owners of America, and then I got involved with Scouts, and I became an instructor through NRA. That's basically why I maintain my NRA membership, is because back in the days when Alex was involved with Scouts, you had to have a certification to sign off on the rifle shooting merit badge. So I became certified so I could do that with the Scouts. And that was really the only reason. I never planned on becoming a professional, instructor. I just did it so I could help out with the Scouts. And we had events, shooting events at the range, our rifle club, and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think that's part of the evolution, is starting to give back. I look at supporting those organizations as kind of giving back, to the community or whatever.
David has an interesting one from the gun channel side. What about hunting? I think that's definitely one. Again, somebody can get introduced, and like Deador's kind of saying, there's people that probably live their whole lives hunting and wouldn't even consider themselves a gun owner if they're asked on a questionnaire. They just don't even think about it and think gun owning is something else, AR-15s or handguns or something. But on the other hand, that doesn't mean all hunters are like that by any means. Most of the people in here have hunted before, so we're all hunters technically. Most, at least everybody we know.
I've never hunted animals, ever. Any kind of an animal at all. Nothing I have against it. I just don't have any desire to wake up at dark 30, go stand in water in December and shoot a duck or something. But
But I mean, most of you took 100 gun owners. Be surprised if 80 of them had at least been hunting once.
I'd say that probably even more than that, honestly.
Well, when we were teenagers, it was almost like it was a requirement in Tennessee. You had to get up, go dove hunting in dove season. You had to go out and sit in the field and see one dove all day. You
get your butt whooped if you didn't, right?
That's right. You had to go hunting. So it's not like we wanted to get up at dark 30 ghost. It's like we had to.
Yeah, it's like, get up, we're going.
Yeah, I don't want to get up at 4 o'clock. What are you doing?
Remember, I grew up in the city in Pittsburgh, in southwestern Pennsylvania. Deer season came around. Get up! It's time to go hunting. What's wrong with your lazy ass?
Hunting, it's something we don't chat about it very often, or at least I don't think enough. But just in hunting, it's easy to dismiss hunting. But you think about it. There's as much nuance and variety in hunting as there is in almost every other aspect of everything, right? There's just like you guys describe people that hunt for food, and then they're going to go out they consider their permits like again, part of the yearly food harvest or whatever, the same as if you had a garden. At some point you're going to go harvest tomatoes. So yeah, you going hunting and fishing and everything are just part of accumulating food for the year. Just that it's keeping in touch with nature and all that. And then you've got hunters that are trophy hunters, of course, going out for the sport of hunting and the thrill of a big game hunt, in a different state where they have to prep and, experience a different type of hunting, or if it's for specific fancy racks or trying to complete a collection of species or something. And then you got like varmints, and you got, necessity type of predator control. And then you just got people that, I remember growing up with hunting was more of an activity that you could do once in a while, just like going on a hayride or something, or going swimming when it's the season. So hunting was the activity, but it was what brought the cousins all together and the kids. So, it got us all together to go someplace and do something. And, whether or not you were successful was sort of bragging rights, but nobody was putting all that much effort into it. It was, I don't want to call it a recreational activity as much as like a bonding thing, right? So there's hunting at all different levels. I know people that are professional hunters that are guides that take people out, and I've experienced guided hunts, and those are amazing. There's guides for a reason. So there's frustrating hunting when you go out and you just try to wing it and you figure it out yourself, do it on the cheap. And then a guided hunt, they don't have to be elaborate, and talk about much more satisfying when you pay somebody who knows the area to take you to where the critters are. And wow, it's just a totally different experience. And some of that horrible stuff that you get when you're just winging it, doesn't happen as often. But anyway, there's just so much variety to hunting. We could probably do whole shows on it, right?
But there's also that aspect of it, like you said, with whether you're hunting with firearms or whether you're hunting with a fishing pole. A lot of people used to do that stuff for the specific reason of bonding with their kids and their family. So, I mean, that's like super important for a lot of people.
Yeah, growing up in Pittsburgh, fishing was just like hunting. When you weren't hunting, you were fishing. It's like, and it was the same thing. 4 o'clock in the morning, get up, we're going fishing.
Yeah.
Like,
And if your dad did it, you wanted to do it too because you wanted to be wherever your dad was. Usually.
Exactly.
your dad or your grandfather, right?
Yep.
And that family aspect of it, you really can't match that with anything else. I mean, that's like super important as far as I'm considered.
Well, I'll throw this out there. If you're going to do a family activity and it's an artificial fake thing, like going somewhere and doing something trendy or stupid or fake, it's completely engineered in plastic versus a family activity that's not only traditional, but like literally takes you back to the earth and the simplicity of nature and to experience and that with your family. That's like a whole different thing besides like going to watch the newest superhero movie, eating popcorn, right?
Well, I could go hunting with my dad, and we'd go out on his old home place where the farm used to be where he grew up. He'd tell me about the way it was when he was a kid and do stuff like that, and I could just imagine. So it was just like passing on information from one generation to the other. So
Mountaineer said out there, trophy hunters mostly paid their way to be given a trophy. And I think a lot of people think trophy hunters think of like the big game, maybe African safari type of thing, or maybe like those Texas, what do they call it, where you have the ranches or whatever, the game preserves.
The hog hunting. Yeah.
Which I don't have a problem with. Do whatever you're going to do. But I don't think that's all trophy hunters. I just happen to know a bunch of guys out here in Arizona where it's tough to sneak up on stuff. That's one of the challenges why people hunt out here. It's just different than where there's like soybean fields and the deers are fat and you sit on a tree stand and you just pick the fattest deer and shoot it, or you have to shoot as many deer as possible so that you have soybeans at the end of the year, right? It's just different out here. And the deers are the size of dogs. I mean, they're smaller and everything. But there's definitely trophy hunters that'll go years and years and years and years and they'll have a trophy, there's still a trophy hunter, but they're bow hunting for dozens of years before they have that trophy. And I hate to see those kind of guys get thrown under the bus with the casually with some of those guys that are, again, just like, oh, I got money, like Dan Blitzerian. I got money. That sounds like an interesting thing to do. What's the fastest, most efficient way for me to get horns on the wall?
And that is super sad because there is a lot of skill and technique to that type of hunting.
Yeah, but I don't have a problem with if somebody wants to grow a bunch of critters and put them out there for Dan Blitzerian to pike and then chop them up for him and put them on a wall. What the hell's the difference between that and anything else? I mean, it's just a different way of doing it. Sure, it's not authentic, but the animal still lived and got fat and on a wall for the rest of the time, I guess. But anyway, so hunting, I think, is a valid one. But again, I don't think any of these are necessary steps. I guess some of them are necessary. You got to buy a gun or else you're never a gun owner. But actually, we've had discussion before about people in other countries that can't legally own them, but are super interested in the history or the knowledge of them and all the different ways that you can know about firearms. And I think they're technically still gun guys, right? I don't know if we can call them gun owners, I guess, technically. So Flopping, I guess, posted this earlier. So we'll jump back to that unless somebody wants to throw something else out there. You're talking about really second and third gen gun people. I legally immigrated to the United States from Egypt. With my parents, I came here and started watching cowboy movies. So I guess, is that what we were just kind of alluding to there? Like you could become a gun guy even having no access, and then the gun ownership is actually like, not the first step in the process of becoming interested in being a gun owner?
I think that's true. I think if you can read about stuff and, you can watch the shows and you can see these people doing this, and you can develop a desire to do it yourself. I really believe that.
And the same applies to kids, right? You can not have access for whatever reason. Parents don't give them to you, or you're too young or whatever, and just be into it and know everything in the world about it, and then finally get to be 18 or 21, whatever, and purchase.
And there's
Yeah.
also the aspect of the people that watch movies or get interested in it, but can't afford to buy a gun at the time that they start their interest. So they save money every month, and maybe 3, 4, 5 months down the road, then they're able to buy a gun. But that they're already a gun person at that point. They just don't have that tool yet.
I think that also works with some of the games, the first-person shooter games that you've got today. Because the kids, they get to see this, they get to see the guns, they get to pretend like they're using them, and then they pick up a desire to shoot the real thing. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Hopefully they
Oh,
do.
of course. Well, I mean, that's probably got to be outreach. I mean, it is outreach. We know from experience that people tell us that's how they transition, right? Like their parents or whatever situation wasn't amenable to having guns around, but they were familiar with them and were interested because of that. What sparked it, and then as soon as possible, they did whatever else needs to be done to be able to acquire them. You know, when they got old enough or moved.
Last year in Tulsa, everybody from the gun channels community, they outreached the crap out of me. I've never seen or handled. I've never.
A lot of that is still pending in court, so we can't talk about it.
Don't be sorry. I mean, if it were not for the people there and the opportunity to go there and the opportunity to meet you guys online first and have the experience of handling some of the firearms I either would have never seen in person nor even held in person in my life, I would never have been able to experience those things.
I tell you an interesting story. When I was doing a training class last December, there was a young man. He just graduated college, and he was taking the class. That's in the same class with me, and he stayed in the same bunkhouse as me, and was talking about he just got out of college and got a job in Chicago. And his parents were really kind of hesitant about the 22-year-old moving to Chicago, and they wanted him to get a gun and get some training for him to be able to defend himself in Chicago, because they're from Dallas and they'd heard how tough Chicago could be. And so he bought a gun, and the thing was his parents said, we'll buy the gun if you go get training. This was his first training class. He'd only owned a gun for about 2 months. And throughout that weekend, you could see him getting so enjoying the moment, enjoying what he was doing and liking it. We still keep in contact. But it was one of those things where he never even had any intention of ever becoming a gun person. He was kind of thrust into it by his parents, who were not gun people either, but they were more worried about him going off to his first job far away and wanted to be able to defend himself. And now he owns multiple guns and has gone to several different training classes. So it's kind of interesting, that side of the story, where it was a job or something that kind of did it for him.
All right, so we got dead air again. That prompts me to move along, although I've got a fly here bugging me, so I'm going to be distracted. We got a lot of the positive stuff, but I suspect there's some negative, what am I calling them, life cycles or whatever, some negative realms you can get into. I mean, without getting into like the obvious criminal crap that we're not going to worry about, is there any other, where do you evolve? I mean, and then there's no reason that someone has to move through all these levels either. Again, these are just all levels. And they may or may not have position amongst themselves or whatever. But assuming that we're trying to map this out, is there of other levels you can get to, or negative levels that we haven't thought about?
Well, for me, I told you I grew up with my dad, hunting and stuff like that. Well, his hunting dog died when I was 19 years old, and he thought he was too old to ever train another one, so he never hunted after that. So I virtually went for 30 years not hunting anymore because I didn't have anybody to hunt with. I kind of lost interest in it. So I had the guns and stuff like that, but I wasn't an active gun person anymore. And until I got back into it about 4 years ago, there was that lull in my life where, it just wasn't there. So, yeah, that can happen.
What about the scenario? And I don't know if it's ever happened to anyone here. It hasn't happened to me. My wife is not a gun person. Obviously, we did not end our marriage because I'm a gun person. But I'm sure that there have been people that have probably lost girlfriends or boyfriends due to the simple fact that they disagreed in owning and utilizing firearms.
Oh, snap. Yeah, that's a good one. Again, yeah, if you kind of come into like a realization that you're going to be interested in guns and then develop an interest, yeah, if your spouse isn't the same, then yeah, that could be an issue.
Another thing might be if you get hit with financial hardships and you're forced to sell a firearm that, for sentimental reasons, whatever, you can't ever replace it.
Oh man, see, that's two things, because you brought it to sad, like Gary immediately talking about a puppy dying, but you got two things there. There's definitely, I'm living that, like where you sell off your stuff, and I'm not selling it off because like I'm desperate or because I hate guns, but because I bought a lot of them as investment and to be worth something so that I could, I'm a capitalist, I can use that capital investment for other things, right? So there's definitely that um, aspect when people either have to or do sell their stuff, and by not having it, that changes your role in the community or whatever. But then, yeah, that idea of having to sell a specific gun, like sure, I'm selling some guns, but I'm not selling them all. And there's certain guns that, hopefully will be crammed into whatever the hell I get crammed into when I'm dead, right? So, yeah, I never thought about that. If you had to sell something like that, that would be freaking devastating, like a family gun or just a gun that's super important to you.
Yeah, I had to sell the Model 66 my grandfather bought me. That hurt. But it was either that or not eat for, so.
How about a nephew killed with a gun?
Yeah, I mean, definitely some kind of accident or tragedy. I don't know if that's called tragedy or definitely whatever. But
It's a traumatic event.
Yeah.
Was it
Yeah,
some sort of
it's
accident,
basically.
John?
I had a nephew that was murdered
Mm.
over a $10 baggie of pot. So
I mean,
I don't feel that pot is a victimless crime.
And I would imagine that would be even more difficult for someone who may be the only gun person in their whole family, and you have a tragedy like that, and the entire family looks at you like, and you like these things. I can't imagine that. That must be crazy.
that was just, yeah, definitely a crazy situation. And that's, again, a manipulated thing, because no one gets hurt in a vehicle and then looks around at the other members of the family and says, and you still drive.
Yeah, that's something that would be really, really weird. Yeah, for sure.
But again, these are cycles or levels or something. I don't know. Levels, I guess, implies they've got position or hierarchy, but cycles, I guess, things that can happen. They definitely affect everyone differently. And, there's people that, well, something negative like that would happen and they're just out of it, right? Sell everything or throw it away or turn anti even, right? And then others, appropriate pause and then move on with their life, realizing, whatever, pragmatically or whatever, that there's it's not the property or it's not the item or whatever. But anyway, yeah. Well, this is tough. So we're talking about negative stuff, but who the hell brought this one up? I think it was on the gun channel side. Another negative one, and I definitely have seen people experience this, and this is one that probably could be addressed more often, and that's overspending on guns and ammo. When you get into any hobby, I mean, I know people that have overspent on their motorcycles, on their guitars. Oh, I know chicks that have overspent on just all kinds of dumb stuff that we would consider dumb stuff, right? But when you're into something and you justify it with whatever your credit card or your potential what I'm going to make with that bonus or whatever, and then you get into something and oh, I only bought 9mm and I realized that those aren't adequate, and you start buying real calibers and it starts adding up.
But think of all the money we save buying that dang old 9mm.
Maybe you figure, okay, I like this, I'm gonna like that, I'm gonna like that, or I'm gonna spend the whole tax refund this year on something, on 3 or 4 things at once because I've been eyeballing them and finger fiddling them at the stores. Man, I don't know, and I mean that's something like I said, I've definitely seen it. I've probably experienced it myself to some extent. More often, like you're at a shop and something used comes in that isn't going to last very long, and because it's something that isn't going to last very long, it's in demand. There's not a lot of haggle on it, so even if you don't have the money laying around, you figure I'm never going to see this thing again, and it's worth the dink now and having to eat ramen for a while or whatever, and get this thing because I'll never be able to see it again, or if I do, it'll be several $100s more the next time I see one.
I've got a buddy that was in that exact situation a couple months ago here, and he's one of those that he'll go to the gun shop, and if he sees a good deal, he'll try to pick it up and all that. But he was really getting into, he had gotten, he sent off his stamp for an SBR, and he wanted to do a custom build SBR. And during the time frame, it was several months, I think. It wasn't that long. It was 2 or 3 months before he got his stamp back. He was buying a couple of guns that he just saw at the pawn shop that was really good deals. He was like, oh, man, like you said, I'm never going to see it for this price again, and that's kind of cool. And then he wasn't expecting the stamp to come back so soon. And he got the stamp and realized I've got to wait 2 or 3 months to save up the money to go get some of the parts for the SBR, his custom build. And that was the one thing he wanted to do. So for him, it was, agonizing because he had to now save money for a few months to go buy the one thing that he really wanted because he was buying guns just on impulse buy. So, he went through that. It's kind of funny.
It's probably a little different with guns. 'Cause, I'm thinking of like Matt with his little cartoon dolls that he buys. Those things are probably like $7 to $20, $50 for an expensive one, I think he said. So it's more casual. You could take $100 and entertain yourself for a long time with those things. And plus they accumulate and you see them and you get your collection and you're done, right? For $30 or $100 or something. With a gun, every time you want a new gun, you're looking at, what, 3 to 5 easy, 5 to 7, depending on the person and the budget. Talking several hundreds of dollars for something that once you stick it in the safe, it takes a while before you start figuring out you got a real collection. Before you start losing room in the safe, you can put several thousands and thousands of dollars into a safe and it still looks empty. And you still don't have a shotgun that's good for home defense and going hunting. And you don't have, a handgun that's for CCW and hunting, and you don't have a rifle, right?
Right.
You just got to quit filling your Ripper 45.
Huh? You said by 1911 you got everything covered? Tactical, long range, underwater, everything.
Well, it depends on how big you are, but a Deagle could do all that. I wouldn't want to carry a Desert Eagle, but I'm sure some people could.
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Some people probably think it's a good idea to be driving around in a Yugo too. So,
So
Yeah.
Mountaineer is saying a stage, he's saying final stage, but stage in ownership. And I definitely agree with this as a stage in ownership because I know people that have gone beyond their first safe. But when your safe is like he's saying a jigsaw puzzle, I'm saying like a Tetris match, when you literally there's levels people will get to, and it takes a while to get to this level, depending on what size your safe is. But people with little stack-ons can get to this level too with just a dozen guns, right? But you get to a level where like you're cramming your guns into your safe, and you know that you're screwing up your guns. Like that this isn't working. Like they don't either. You're the kind of person that puts them all in boxes or socks or something, and they won't jam in anymore, or you're like me and you just jam them in there on top of each other and you know you're scratching them. Like this isn't good for the guns. Like I need to buy a safe. So either you got to buy a bigger one or a second one, and then you're at that level. You're not like, oh yeah, no problem. Let me just throw $500 in another safe, because now it's like you've already got another gun in mind. Actually, you probably got like 6 other guns in mind, and you're trying to figure out which gun to buy next. And now you got to decide not which gun, but now I got to buy a safe. So that's definitely a level of, I don't know if it's gun ownership as much as just like acquiring. If you go down the path of acquiring, you will get to that level. I don't know if anybody wants to talk about that, but if you've experienced that one, but that's definitely one. And I know people honestly that have gone to more than 2 safes. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I kind of started filling up my last safe around Thanksgiving last year, and my wife, in her infinite wisdom, decided for Christmas that she was gonna, what she thought was, get me what she thought was a safe for Christmas, and she tried to do it kind of secretively and didn't want me to know about it, which is kind of cool. And I like it; it's a fun. But she got me a little stack-on gun cabinet, and she didn't understand the difference between a gun cabinet and a gun safe. And she said, "I got us on a really good deal," and this, that, and the other. And it came in. I was like, "Oh, this is a cabinet." And she goes, "Oh, I'm so sorry." I said, "No, it's fine. You know, it can still be utilized." But I think that when you start talking about acquiring, and that's the next evolution of having too many guns, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because I think that at that point you've established that you're in it for the long haul. But we all have to, I mean, like you said, everyone's going to eventually go through that time frame where you either got to buy a bigger safe, a new safe, or start getting rid of guns. I personally am not one that likes to get rid of guns, but some people will. So that's the decision: is do I get rid of guns, or do I go spend $500 on a new safe, like you said?
No, I don't know if anybody wants to throw anything else out there. I've got to the point where I don't mind selling them now. I mean, for a long time, there's a whole bunch, there's got to be at least 100 videos of me saying, I'll never sell a gun, blah, blah, selling guns, waste time, blah, blah. I regret every gun I ever sold. I sell them all the time now. I had to start selling them in like 13, and yeah, I don't mind. And at some point, some of the collections I have were like for a reason. For me, for YouTube videos. I'm not making YouTube videos anymore. I don't need those guns. So to me, I'd much rather have a server running for another month or 2 months or whatever, and use that, or I guess shuffle that investment around, than to just have another gun in a safe that I don't look at ever.
Ghost, you can never have too many guns.
Yeah, I know that takes.
I agree 100%.
I think you have to get to a level, and like I say, I don't know if I'm not saying these are hierarchical or whatever, like that this is something because I've known people that I don't know, you must know people like this. I know one guy who works at a shop. He will buy whatever, and it's not even like whatever's new, just whatever. He'll buy something, he'll fiddle with it, and then he'll sell it to this other shop. Sometimes he only owns these things for like a week or whatever. Like he just has like a fit. He's like, oh, I need to be able to put an RMR on this gun, or I'm going to get this one and stipple it this way, and then don't like it, and then he gets rid. But he's willing to get. He doesn't do it as like a business. He's just like fussy. He's like, it isn't exactly what I wanted. I expected it to be like this, and it ain't. He doesn't sell every gun, in other words, but he will have no issues. If he doesn't like the gun, he's not acquiring them. It's gone. So he loses money, he don't care. Like, it's part of the gun ownership for him is like, it's just a fluid thing. He'll buy it, he uses it. If he likes it, he keeps it. If he doesn't, he moves it on to the next one. I guess if he figures he gets, what are you only going to get? Maybe 60% of your money back that way. And if you're putting money into RMR, like let's say an optic on a pistol or something, if you spend 1,000 putting that together, you're barely going to get 400 at the store, right? Maybe 5. You're not going to get anywhere near your money back. So he's got to be willing to experience the financial loss as like part of the satisfaction he gets out of putting his
Well,
hands on.
I wonder if part of this stage and level is also going from the person who buys guns for every gun they buy is for a specific reason or tool, transitioning to, like you said, now instead of every gun I buy is for a specific reason, to just buying guns to enjoy them. And is that part of the stage we're talking about, possibly?
No, I think that's another stage though, because that is something different, right? You definitely start buying guns for whatever reason, right? And then you get into this level where you're like, oh, I'm going to buy a shotgun also, or I'm going to buy a bolt action. And then maybe a third level is where, you've bought your pistol because you want to do self-defense, or you bought your rifle because you want to be in a match with a friend of yours or something. And then you decided to buy a hunting shotgun. And then maybe the third level is when you buy a gun that you either didn't want to or didn't, but because it's a gun, you bought it anyway. Like I bought a 12 gauge shotgun or 20 gauge shotgun one time, so I accidentally bought a box of 12 gauge or 20 gauge shells. And I was like, well, I'm not going to return these shells. I'll just buy a shotgun. Like at some point, you're just going to buy guns because it's a thing to do. Maybe that's the thing. Like, well, I might go hunting, so I'm going to buy that gun in case. Like that kind of thing.
I collect U.S. martial arms. Like I said, my father was in the U.S. Army for almost 22 years. In the 90s, I got the wild hair that I wanted an M1A1 carbine. And in the course of about 5 years, I owned maybe 8 carbines until I finally bought and traded into that M1A1. So that's kind of something you might want to do too. Use the guns that you've got to buy, or trade into another gun that you really want.
See, there's different levels here. So now Ghost was kind of talking about practicality to something else besides practicality, right? I think you go
just collecting guns, I guess, or accumulating guns.
Yeah, and that might be for investment or for security, like prepping or whatever the word you want to say, right? So, but you could have come into it like, well, I'm not a gun guy, but I heard that AR-15s are going to be illegal, so I'm going to buy a bunch of AR-15 lowers because my friend said that's the strategic way to do it. And now you own 10, AR lowers, and you're a gun guy, I guess. You're a gun owner, I guess. But now your next step in the life cycle is like you're saying, like to buy a gun that's useful. Like I'm going to go buy a gun that actually solves a purpose. So in other words, I guess I'm throwing it backwards on what Ghost said there. You could become a next level of a gun owner by going into practical. Because at some point, some people get into guns as like a hobby, or I mean, not hobby, hunting, or maybe you were given a gun as like a gift, right? And then it's like, okay, great. I have this hunting gun, which is stupid because it's like a long range hunting gun or a varmint gun, or I have this like gift gun, but now I want a gun for self-defense. So there's that transition into I need a useful gun, and then I don't know if everybody gets guns for practical purposes, but if someone says, okay, I live in an apartment, they buy a gun appropriate to the apartment, or I live in a mobile home, they buy a gun appropriate to the mobile home. I would consider that like buying a gun as a useful tool, like as a practical thing. But going back to what John said, then. Sorry, you were talking about, refresh my memory on what you just said there.
He was talking about accumulating guns and then using those to trade for another purpose.
So yeah, so I was going to say a realizing an appreciation. So, depending on how long you've been a gun owner and the type of gun, some guns are, like let's say a Hudson. Let's say you buy a Hudson on a whim and put it in the drawer, and then all of a sudden they're out of business, and you just made $1,000 on this gun that you unintentionally bought, right? Like I think what John was saying, let's say you get out of collecting this and you get into collecting that, or I bought this initial 12, but I'd rather have this ideal 6. So you sell the 12 to get to those 4 of the ideal ones, kind of trade up. trade into more appropriate or more accurate or more precise, slots in your collection.
Yeah,
Well,
I think everyone's kind of. But
I guess I was just say these are almost like hierarchies, levels of each of these circles. Like once you get into hunting, there's going to be levels of involvement in hunting, for example. Once you get into collecting, there's going to be a level of involvement into collecting. Go ahead.
yeah, I was going to say that right now is this year I'm trying to get into long range precision, and I've never really done long range before, and that's something that I'm really excited about because it's expanding my horizons. Well, obviously there's going to be that investment, and understanding that I'm getting ready to go into a whole new realm of firearms for me, that there's going to be, it's not just the rifle, you're talking the accessories, the optics, the bipods and all that. So I think that when you start going to, like you said, to different levels or different areas of firearms, for me it's fun because I've experienced carbines, I've experienced handguns for a long time, but now I'm going to something new, and it's rejuvenated my love for firearms in a different way because I'm challenging myself to learn something completely new, and that's fun for me.
I'm going to narrow cast to Dead Horse and Gizzard. Obnoxious grabbed you your foghorn patch. So if somebody might say this chat was horrible, this is a complete waste of time. However, Dead Horse in Utah was able to chat to us on the internet, to Obnoxious in Indianapolis, to walk from wherever he was to some other place in that building and steal a patch for Gizzard in Kansas. So I think that's pretty neat.
That's awesome.
That was an awesome patch. That's from Grid Defense, and it's an awesome patch. It was a very highly coveted patch at the show this weekend.
I think Tim had a good one out here on the YouTube side as well. At some point, as gun owners, we collect reasons to collect, or we collect reasons to own guns. And I think that's probably true that's probably a level. And then somebody else had said it more concisely. Mountaineer said impulsiveness kills the bank. And I think that's what I was searching for before. Like, impulsiveness is like some level when you're like comfortable enough as a gun owner that like, oh yeah, I'm just going to buy this gun because I don't give a shit. I'm going to buy this gun.
Yeah, I think that level comes to where, for a lot of us, including myself, that you have to get creative to justify why to buy these guns, but it's not really hard in your mind to justify it. So that's a whole nother level,
Yeah, my 20 gauge Shockwave and my Taurus G2C were both impulse buys.
Did you regret either?
Not so far.
Yeah, I can't imagine regretting a Shockwave. I don't own one of them yet, but I imagine at some point it'll happen.
The reason why I got it is because Sarge he got the 12 gauge, right? And we were talking one night on his show about it, and he's like, I would really like to see what the 20 gauge was like. So walk into the local gun shop, remember the one we were talking about on what was it, a few weeks ago, that's also like the general store. They had one on their peg wall, right behind the counter. So I ended up buying that, and then I shot like a minute long film of me shooting it so Sarge could see what that one was like. Well, that's the whole reason why I bought it, is because he brought it up on his show about wondering what the 20 gauge was like compared to the 12.
Now, my question is, do they make those little short 1-inch shells in 20?
No.
Then that would be a deal breaker. I really, 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 really like 20s, but the problem with them firearms is mag length. So,
are you sure? I think they do. Are you
if
sure?
I do, then I would totally go for a 20 because that seems.
Yeah, I'm a big 20 gauge guy too.
Yeah, I haven't seen the mini shells in 20. I've only ever seen them in 12.
I haven't looked in a long time though. I haven't bought anything in a long time like that.
Yeah, this hole's the same amount as the 12 gauge. It's 5+1.
I know, but I like the idea of the mini shells in those.
Yeah,
firearms
you could probably hold.
Capacity.
Yeah, you probably hold like 8 or 9 of those little things.
That's what I'm thinking. And in 20, I mean, that'd be just neat. That'd be super neat. It's still got to be like 538s coming out of there, right?
Yeah, they got them. I just looked them up.
How many pellets? Does it say how many pellets are in them?
The one I'm looking at here is 7.5 shot, but I'm sure they've got. I mean, if you're like me and you hand load, it doesn't matter. You just cut them to the length you want.
Oh, I never thought about doing making your own, huh?
Yeah, I've got the crimpers and all that, roll crimpers and stuff.
All right, so we got a couple of other comments that I'm going to use as suggestions, and one would be somebody said something about optics in here. Mountaineer said optics is a rabbit hole. So I'm going to count that as, you become a gun owner or you got guns your whole life, and I think this happens to both types of gun owners. And then you've got a bunch of guns. So most people get a gun, a second gun or whatever. They've got a couple of guns for whatever different things they're doing, and then maybe I'm not counting like the $30 garbage, but I'm saying like a real legitimate accessory, like a decent optic or a tripod or a bipod or whatever that's going to like be decent, like something that actually costs almost as much or as much as a gun. Like that's a hurdle that gun owners, I think it's a transition. You get to a point where you're like, you know what, I appreciate shooting enough. I'm going to spend money on glass. Like I don't need to buy everything the cheapest I could possibly do. Or like, I'm not just going to go with something that looks like what it's supposed to be. I'm going to buy the actual thing. And, whether or not you stay in that realm, like you appreciate it and you decide to continually buy, the quality stuff as opposed to stuff that looks just like it. I think that's a transition though. And some people never go into it, right? They're like, no, why would I ever buy anything that I could buy something that looks just like it?
Or maybe you just don't like optics on your guns.
Well, I guess, yeah, but I'm saying if you're making that decision to trick out a gun it's sort of like the safe thing, right? Like you can either just keep buying base models or at some point you decide to put some coating on this or engrave a slide or change the stock or glass bead, just the upgrades that people might do to a gun. There's people that buy guns and keep them stock. There's some people that immediately start screwing with their guns as soon as they get them. And then there's those people that like have to decide, okay, I'm going to see what this is like. I'm going to put some effort into this gun for whatever reason. Maybe I'm doing a good hunt, so it's worth me going all out on this one and not buying, having 3 bolt actions. I'll have 2, and this one will be really good.
In that same vein, you got another side to that. Somebody might have, say, a red dot on their AR. They develop astigmatism. Now they got to transition to a prism scope instead. Because if you got astigmatism, you can't see that reticle clearly because it turns into a blob. So instead of like going from one tier to another, you got to go laterally and switch from one sight to a different sight.
Or what if you're colorblind and you might want a red dot, but what if you're colorblind and a red or green dot, you can't really pick it up? And there's so many things in optics that go into that. That I never thought about, but I was having a conversation with the other guys. He can't go on a red dot because he's colorblind and he can't pick up the dot. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that one. I don't know if I ever heard of that one before, just when you guys start talking about that recently.
Yeah, I never heard about that. And I was talking to a guy at Hollow Sun, and there's a guy there talking about, that because Hollow Sun's coming out with like a gold dot, like kind of a yellowish gold. And the guy says, I'm interested in that because I can't pick up a red or a green dot, but apparently yellow for him is color neutral. And he can pick that dot up. So he was excited that they're going to have a yellow one because for him, that works for his color blindness. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I can see that because if I'm using a laser on something, I see a green laser better than I see a red laser because of being colorblind. So I can see that possibly being a situation with an optic.
And then besides the optic, there was something else I thought.
Yeah. I guess Obnoxious got it. Yeah. It was a Foghorn Leghorn patch.
You on the phone with somebody? I think he's on another chat. Dang, I thought there was another comment that came in besides the optic. Maybe it's ahead of the optic one. All right, well, besides that one, since I can't remember what it was and I was typing something else and Gary distracted me, ruined the show. What about getting into the industry? I mean, again, these aren't all the levels that people are all going to go through, but it's certainly a realm, and getting into the industry is the definition of that, I think, is changing all the damn time. And there's so many different ways you can get into the industry. And that's sort of like a line you cross, and then.
Yeah, I think all of us in here that do content, and we're part of the industry, that was a weird decision for me at least. But I think that and I'll say this, being part of the industry and the community as far as a content creator has opened up my eyes so much more to the industry. You see how politics plays roles. You see how, different spending trends pays a price to the industry. And I've really, it's opened my eyes, and I really have, kind of enjoyed educating myself on different aspects of the industry. And it's only because I started creating content, I had to learn about the industry. So I think that will open up a lot of people's minds.
Yeah, it's bugging me. I can't figure out where the hell I saw another comment. There was another element to this. When does a gun owner start thinking about what to do with their guns when they're gone? Oh, interesting. So David brings that one up on the gun channel side. I think that might be an age thing more than a cycle. I mean, it is a life cycle of gun owner for sure, right? But I think no matter where you're at in owning guns, you get to a certain age, and if you've got kids or whatever, or not, right, you're going to start thinking about that stuff, right? So, what do you guys? Is there anything else to that?
I mean, I think that it's probably age. For me, it actually happened a few months ago, and I was over with Jaeger, and he challenged everybody to go home and plan your funerals, kind of dark, but plan your funeral and talk about your next of kin and your last will and testament and all that. And I never thought about what I'm going to do with my guns. And obviously for me, it's pretty simple. My wife's not interested. My daughter is somewhat interested in guns. So, she'd probably get it all. And, but I never even thought about that until someone brought it up. So maybe, I don't know, it's age, maybe. I think you're right.
Well, I think that one, whenever that becomes part of the awareness of a gun owner, and then kind of mixed with the affiliation or joining the impulse to join a group or an organization or support an organization, right? I think that leads to Second Amendment awareness. At some point, that or maybe the Second Amendment awareness, there's probably other ways you can get to it, I guess. But anyway, when you start thinking about beyond the guns you've got, but like how your kids are going to be able to keep these things, or how come I can't have additional? Perhaps if you're just thinking about yourself, why can't I have more? Why do I only get these? Then you start thinking, once you've acquired a bunch, then you start thinking, what's next? And then 2A starts coming into it. But again, I don't know if these are transitional. I don't think anybody has to go through any of these levels to get to any of these. And there's certainly people out there that are pro 2A that have no interest in owning guns, don't own a gun, would never own a gun, but are still 100% on board with pro 2A and everybody else owning a gun if they want one. So it's dead air. So Angelina on the gun channel, on the YouTube side. Sorry, I thought it was on the gun channel side, but it turns out it's the YouTube side. guns are an investment as well. It's an awesome hobby. You should have a plan lined up for them no matter your age. It's just smart. That's a good point. And I think, the investment thing, again, if like, again, thinking of like a cycle, at some point you buy guns because they're an investment. Again, you either have enough knowledge or you're around and there's an opportunity to get something at what is a deal, or, maybe that's the indication of the level. Like if you bought a gun because you knew it was a good deal, even if you didn't like that gun or you have no interest in that gun, you just know that it's going to acquire more worth. Again,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's its own. I think it's its own level. I've never bought a gun honestly for an investment. I know you have, obviously Cycle has, and other people have. I haven't reached that stage yet to where I'm looking for an investment. I'm still in the practicality side of things, and I think probably one day, I probably will, but I haven't reached that stage yet.
Now, I don't know if I didn't sit, well, maybe when I was working at Dalewell, I probably bought some guns that I was like, oh, I'm just going to buy this because it's an investment, right? Especially with Y2K coming, I guess, I don't know if I thought of them as long-term investments, as like just necessary. It's sort of like begin, as prepping, it's worth having 2 or 3 of these kind of things. But when I talk about selling guns off, it's just because they have value. I'm not talking guns that I bought, never opened, had in a, because I know people who buy guns, never even open the box. They don't even verify if the serial number is correct. They just buy them, put them in a safe. At some point in the future, they're, a commodity. But I mean, these people probably don't even hardly open them to look to see if they're risky or anything. But
so have you ever bought a gun strictly for an investment? Like, so you've never consciously said, I'm going to buy this, I think it's going to be worth something 10 years down the road. You've never done that yet?
No, that's what I'm saying. Like, I think I have. One time I just came across this one pistol and I was like, this is an absurdly low price and I'm not taking advantage of this person. They, for some reason, are selling it for this price and they're satisfied with this price. It's not like, it's supposed to be $300 and or $330 and it's marked at 30 accidentally. So it was like a fair deal and it was a good deal. But that wasn't a gun I wanted. I talked myself into wanting it. I'm like, oh, I guess I could like this gun. I never liked that gun. It was like a high standard, that little goofy 22 gun. But I bought that gun only because I got it so cheap. It was at an auction and nobody was bidding on it. And I'm like, well, shit, I'm not gonna leave it sit here and not sell. I mean, I might as well. It was like $12 or something. It was like no money. Like I might as well just buy that thing. And then, at some point later on, when it came time to start selling guns off to make some money, it was like at the top of the list because I never even wanted the damn gun. So, and I didn't have to sell it if I bought it for $25 and I sold it for 60, it technically made money, but I'm no millionaire, right? So no, I've never like bought $1,000 gun with the expectation it's going to turn into a $5,000 gun or something like that.
No, I know John earlier was talking about he collects U.S. Marshal stuff, and that's a whole nother stage we haven't talked about either. Is I know Cycle Camp, he's got a project that he's trying to collect different war era guns. So I mean, is that a whole nother level right there where you're actually collecting for an actual project? I mean, that's kind of cool.
Well, I suspect that as we're thrashing through this, that each of these areas could become levels. So I think you can become a collector when you buy the second gun, or accidentally you figure out you own 2 of a gun of some kind of series, or there's something about these 2 guns that are similar. And if you bought 4 more, you'd have every one of them, and you become a collector. And then there's other people that for whatever reason are like, oh, I'm going to set out and acquire this collection, to set out to find them. So yeah, I think there's levels to the collecting and reasons for collecting.
I think that second gun is definitely the start of a collection, because it doesn't matter if you're just going to buy 3 guns, a rifle, shotgun, and a pistol. I mean, that's a collection.
It's like those minis that the company that makes the crickets coming out with, where if you buy one now, when you buy the special edition one, you automatically have the option when they come out with that model for the next in the series, in that serial number, you get first crack at that serial number. Like if you get serial number 10 in the Mini Mosin, I think the next one's the Garand they're coming out with. You get the first crack at getting serial number 10, so that as they come out with them in the different model rifles, you get the serial number in that next one, so that all your serial numbers will match from one gun to the next.
Holy moly! I didn't even know that they were doing a series. Well, I heard they said something like first in a series, but I didn't know they already had like. And I didn't know they were going to be Garands. I figured they'd be other bolt action things. So that's cool.
Yeah, that's not the Garand. That's right. It's the M1903. You're right. But yeah,
Oh,
Tardot was
that's
talking
cool.
about it last night when Ghost did that live stream from their barbecue.
Oh, nobody posted anything on Gun Channels. I didn't even know anything was live yesterday.
You know, I went for my phone. What we did, we had a barbecue last night, and it was for gun channels only, and then industry people. And we rented a house. We went and got burgers and buns and chips and hot dogs. And at the house, we sat there and cooked out until about midnight, and just enjoyed the brotherhood and the fellowship of being friends and family, and gave us time to kind of talk about what we. So what I did is I set up a camera, a phone in one of the off rooms, and just went live. And we went live for several hours, and whoever wanted to come into that room and talk for a few minutes about what they had seen and what they experienced and all of that during the show this weekend, they just went on for several hours. It was really great. And I would have put it on Gun Channels, but I don't have a computer. I was on cell phone, so I apologize for that.
So they would come in and talk to you for like 7 minutes or so.
Well, the live stream went on for several hours, and it never had a lull. There was always someone in there telling about what happened, what they did, what they experienced, what they saw. And we had the chat out there was asking questions that, hey, did anybody see this, or what do you think of this, and all that. So we answered questions, and everybody, there was 20 of us, 20, 25 people or whatever it was at the cookout, and everyone kind of went in there and did their thing and talked about their experiences. And for a lot of the guys there, it was their first industry show. They'd been to Wanamaker, but they'd never been to any kind of industry show. So it was really interesting to see. I try to ask everybody that came in who was like obnoxious and all that, say, was it what you expected? Is it more? Was it less? Was it overwhelming? What were your initial thoughts when you walked in on Friday? And it's like, you're at an industry show. And obviously we fielded questions about NRA and all of the historic events that could be taking place in the next 24 hours. But it was really a cool thing. I think everyone enjoyed it on the chat and us. And I think I was talking to Clover last night that, NRA, we're going to rent a house every year. At SHOT Show, we're going to start renting a house, and we're going to have a cookout. And the criteria to be invited to the cookout is you have to be gun channels or industry. And what we wanted to do is bring some of the industry people in a more laid-back, friendly environment and hang out. And especially for some of the newer content creators that may not have access to some of the people that we've worked with, introduce them and start maybe forging relationships in a laid-back atmosphere instead of at the actual show. So I thought it was a really cool experiment, and I think everyone enjoyed it.
If you're going to have everybody get together like that, then we could probably work something out with like a timeshare, and then we could get there for free and then do the timeshare presentation and then do your cookout. Yeah,
and I tell you another thing that Chloe and I were talking about is there was a row, kind of like a SHOT Show, but there was like a row of the nonprofits, and they also had some other stuff. And we thought about, we kind of cool to maybe talk to NRA next year or whatever, and on press row outside the actual exhibit hall, set up a Gun Channels like podcast booth, and people can bring in industry people, other content creators, and do a podcast and have like an open Gun Channels like chat all day long, and different people can come in and do interviews and all that, because I don't know how much that costs, but I think that could be funded pretty easily if we did that. That would be another experiment, is having the Gun Channels banner and having different podcasts running on one little chat, but having different people come in and interview other people. That would be kind of cool also.
Yeah, that's cool. So you're talking like, convention centers have a giant room usually or whatever, and then maybe a couple of different rooms that they can join or whatever. But, they'll have the exhibition area. So, of course, that's in a building. There's hallways to get to the building, and it's got to be fire regulations and stuff. So they almost always have like some big wide hallway that goes like from the front entrance of the building to all the different doors to the main, room or whatever. And so far, every venue I've been at, in that big wide main hallway, they set up little booths, and that's where they do like the NRA radio and the NRA TV, and then like big syndicated radio shows will be there, and then probably like big podcasters. Like I bet you, was Craig there with FPC doing his coffee?
Yeah, FPC was there. You had We Like Shooting had one day. I don't think they were there every day, but We Like Shooting had one day.
Oh, we could
And you
probably
had-
find out from them if it was like something that
Right.
was probably not free if they were only there one day. Right?
Yeah, and I would imagine it's not free, but I mean, I can't imagine it being an absorbent. It's not like you're renting real estate in the exhibit hall. It's a little 6-foot little table booth type thing. So I can't imagine it being an exorbitant amount of money. And I think that could be covered pretty easily if we know ahead of time. And I just thought it would be a cool idea to have a Gun Channels podcast go on the entire day of the show, and people could jump in and out and say, hey, we've got a booth outside. I'd love to interview you away from the noise and the crowd. Would you like to come in and sit in for half an hour on this podcast? And whoever's there could just jump on and do an interview.
Mm-hmm. Well, we don't have to worry about the money side of it because we've already been told by our angel investor, Flippy, that anytime we need money, he's got money for us. So we don't have to worry about the cost.
It's nice to have Daddy Warbucks, huh?
Yeah. So anyway, in the future, then all you got to do is say, hey, we can't get on the thing, so somebody post this on Gun Channels for us, and then it would have been on Gun Channels for you. Because I didn't even know. I was sitting there going, is anybody live tonight? And everybody's like, no. So I looked on YouTube, and I didn't see nothing live. Like, all right.
It was literally one of those things where we were cooking out burgers, and while we were waiting the burgers to cook, I was like, why don't we just set up a live camera and just go live and let people come in and tell their stories? And it was really impromptu, but I think it worked out really. It was fun. Everyone had a good time. We were laughing and joking and telling stories, and I think the chat enjoyed it. I mean, we had a solid crew of like 30 people for several hours just out there enjoying what we were doing and listening to the stories and asking questions. So, like I said, it was really impromptu, but I think it could be something we do in the future.
Yeah, it was hilarious in some parts. Like when Clover decided he was going to go dancing right in front of the phone right across. Well, who was it that was talking? Was it Arminta and Tardot that were talking? Clover just goes dancing right in front of them.
Yeah, and we had roll call, relive, and he walked past Hickok and John, and they were doing an interview, and he just yelled out, "You're a cuck," and "You shill," and they started yelling at Hickok, and their handler asked them to leave. It was pretty funny because he reenacted it.
And didn't he say he had Cindy with him, and she was just like all embarrassed or something? That was a funny story.
I'm sure that's an everyday thing with roll call and Cindy. Just saying.
Yeah, probably. I wouldn't be surprised.
All right. Well, just to keep it on the topic of life cycle of the gun owner, I'm going to reel it back in. But I think at this point, it's top of the hour. It's 2:00 Arizona time. So that's the Second Amendment. We could call it 2 p.m. for 2A. But unless anybody else has or wants to throw anything else in there, I'm guessing let's wrap it up. I don't know who's next as far as shows. Rich, you got a show tonight?
Yeah, at 8 Eastern. And
So
does Yankee still do his show on Sunday night?
That's the thing. I don't even know like how often Yankee does his or when. I know Matt used to do some, so I don't even put those in the schedules. I know
Matt just went live.
Yours. We're guessing the Gun Gals is not going live. And then Midnight will probably be live because he's not traveling, I don't think. And then, so there's other stuff to watch. Yoder will usually post Come and Talk It, a syndicated radio show out of Texas. And I usually post that on the main page of Gun Channels. But otherwise, thanks everybody for the conversation. We had been in Gizzard's. How come I can never remember the name of your leftover show?
The Early Bird Jet.
Early Bird. It makes sense. I just can't remember for some reason. Because it's probably early watch. So, blame Jimmy. So, anyway, we were all chatting in the end of Gary's show there and kind of thought, well, let's put something together here and work towards this idea of charting out the evolution or the life cycle, I guess, of a gun owner, with the concept that if we all are aware of the ways that you can become a gun owner and the ways that you can travel through or become, what to do as a gun owner, maybe that's something that can be useful for people who are looking in as non-owners or non-interested parties to see the variety and the differences we've got out here and the levels of it all and some of the reasons. And eventually I'm going to try to put some of this stuff into a more visual thing. And I appreciate everybody who's willing to help out with their time and their insight to collaborate on this. That's what it's all about. And we had, I don't know how many people all the time watching. We got 25 out there now. But a bunch of people participated by using the little thummy thing on the YouTube. Even more appreciation to the people on Gun Channels, the community we built, going on 6 years ago now, a place for conversations like this to take place and for people like Gary to post chats that create the conversation that we just had, a place for people like Ghost and others that were motivated to go to Indiana to be part of the industry and to share their experiences there and to grow channels and projects, based on all that effort, and to grow the community and to evolve the community. Thanks to all your efforts and the people that support them. Thanks to John for jumping in. Both of the Johns, the one John Z who joined me in New York. I actually just got contacted by the captain of the boat that me and John Z were on to go to the Bannerman Castle Island. He's
yeah, that was pretty awesome.
As soon as we got off the boat and started posting pictures, he's like, "Hey, I was the captain of that boat." So I've known him for a while now on YouTube, and he just let me know that May 1st is going to be the first day that the castle is open. He says it's still in good shape. So anybody that's in the area of New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, wherever they culminate there, that's just north of the West Point military, whatever is it, school, whatever it is. Just north of there, there's an island on the river, is that? Hudson River?
Hudson River, yes.
There's an island on the Hudson River, and the guy bought it a long time ago, and he put a castle on there. And a couple of years ago, I drove up there in the van, and me and John met up with John, and we drove out to that thing on a boat. And that guy that was the captain of that boat has been in contact with me, and that's pretty cool. Anyway, so thanks to that John for joining in, and thanks to the other John who's new to Gun Channel. You're not new to Gun Channels. You got your account signed in again, and you joined into the chat. Always good to get insight from people that are not new to guns, but new to this conversation, this using the electronic medium. We become familiar with everything, with our firearms, with our conversation, with our little inside jokes and stuff, and having new people join and be part of these conversations is what keeps us in line and keeps us in check and keeps us aware of, the evolution of our conversations, at least for me, so that these conversations don't just become repeats and broken records. So Gary, thanks for doing the show earlier, and quit saying thanks to people. I'll say thanks to Artisan Tony though, since you had to leave. And anybody else jump in that had to leave? Oh yeah, Patriot was in here earlier. You guys are trying to make me forget about Patriot, but I won't, because Patriot's doing his what is it? The PIL? No, DLP, the Defend Liberty Project, where he's encouraging people to be aware of the infringements on your freedom at your local level and to express those either in a video or some sort of an online project or a blog post or a meme or however it is you want to record and try to reach people about the infringements on your freedom, focused on liberty and infringements on our individual freedoms, and then to share that information not just with the web or on the web, but with actual human beings, and get the experience and the experience of having to voice a concern and an issue like this or like freedom to people in real life. I think that's a great project and challenge, and it's one that very few people are taking them up on. And it's obvious it takes work, it takes effort, but I think it's super valuable. I like that. And it's neat that he's challenging people to do stuff like that. If you challenge people to do something for free, or you challenge people to do something easy, then it's great to get participation. But I like that Patriots challenging people to do something that's pretty damn hard and difficult, but would have some payoff. So it's awesome. Anyways, calling that the Defend Liberty Project. Check that out. We've also got Adam. I don't know if he's still out there, challenging people to you get this, Ghost. Adam is challenging people to make a video telling them what they think of the Second Amendment, what the Second Amendment means to them.
It's awesome. Yeah, I did my video last week.
Pretty original. I remember being interviewed with that question somewhere in 2018 by Ghost. But
yeah, how about that? Huh? No, I put my video out there also, and it's awesome. I also want to remind people of 2A Fun, Artisan Tony. 2afun.com's got a few days left of the spring challenge where he's trying to get everybody out there to shoot in the range. So go to 2afun.com and look at that one as well. It's a really good one.
Now I want to offer an offer to. There's a lot of people that have suggested that they're going to leave all their guns, and if they want, they can leave all their valuable product or valuable items to me. And anybody who puts all their guns into the will for me, then I'm going to offer as an appreciation. I'm going to send you some caramel apples and chocolates. So just give me your address and I'll, once everything's signed, go ahead and eat those chocolates. And thank you. Appreciate it. But wait till everything's signed. Please make sure everything's signed first and dated correctly.
I hope Knives knows that you're giving away his chocolate.
Oh, Knives can't eat these chocolates. They're bad for Knives. Well, now they're talking about blood diamonds, and we got dead air. So we'll end it with that. Thanks, everybody, for watching and listening. And back to chat sometime in the future. This was just a special one, so this isn't any kind of a series or anything.